Hello and welcome to Swatches Art Livestream number 100. Great to have you on this 100th episode. I'm illustrator Clint Curley, and here with this episode, as with most of our normal Friday episodes, we are going to be looking at art submissions from you, the viewers, who are also a lot of art students and aficionados that just want to dabble in the fantasy art and concept art fields. So we have an art challenge that is a Magic the Gathering themed challenge, and we're going to be taking a look at the finals that were submitted in by the artists. We have 12 artists that joined in the challenge, but we only have 10 entries that we'll be taking a look at. And we're also going to be joining in a moment by one of the artists of the community as a guest, Nito. They just had a little hiccup with their internet connection. So she will be joining us in just a moment. But I'll
Just
take
right now.
Okay, now she's here.
I managed
Excellent.
to make it. Sorry about that, everybody.
Okay, well, Nito, good to have you back. I think Anna, who's normally with us, has some things to do since we're off of the normal day today.
Yes.
Yeah, so normally this live stream is on Friday. I just had to postpone it from last Friday because I was out of town. But we also will have one this next Friday, so in a couple of days. So let's run over a couple of announcements and we'll jump into the images and be looking at those. Okay, so we also do have a stream tomorrow. That is for the YouTube channel members at the tier 2 or higher. This is a paint over stream where the members get to send in their images, and we just pick 3 of them by lottery, and we do paint overs of them for about 2 hours. I'm on Discord and chatting along with whoever is joining me out there. We're just having a good time, just chilling and playing around with the images and testing out ideas and how to improve things. It's a little less education based than this one. And the artists can send in whatever they want. They can be more sketchy, or it can be a finished piece. It can be recent, or it can be older. That's all the same. Then this Friday, we're going to be looking at Group 2's finals of this same art challenge topic that we're looking at on this episode. And if you do have a comment, feel free to put it in the live chat over here. Make sure that you do mention Swatches in the comment, and we'll flag that in orange for me so that I can see that. We already have quite a few people in here. We have Hobbit, Anna, and Olivia, and Joakim. And the other name in Russian that I don't remember how to pronounce. Was it Anastasia? Was that the English version? I don't remember.
Maybe. Could be.
Tyler, Hisham, good to see you guys. Of course, if you enjoy this, please like, comment, and share. Just take a moment to like the video. We usually get like 1,500 views on these videos and maybe 30 likes. So if you would please just take a moment and just click the like, it would really, really help the channel. And of course, if you do want to have a one-on-one consultation with me for an hour, you can go at art-mentor.com and schedule a consult out there. So, Nito, what have you been working on over the last time that I've been out of town?
Well, what have I been working on? Just a character concept and things for my portfolio. But nothing too fancy really. Just wanted to say so sorry for being a little bit late. It's just things out of my control and the internet router being crazy. But I've fixed it. So yeah, sorry about that, Clinton and everyone.
You've seen my stream before, right?
Yes, but still, uh, Yeah, apologies were in order.
Not a problem. We didn't even get out of the announcements and you already got in.
Yeah, I ran for it with my life.
Oh yeah, I didn't put in here, but I this going out of town. It was a fun trip going out, but it also just threw me off of my regular routine a bit. I do not have the next challenge open. Normally that would have opened last Saturday. It
Right.
would have been following Group One's final. So that is to be announced. Um, and it's not out there yet, so don't go looking for it. But as soon as it is out there and what it is, maybe I'll record a video talking about it and put it up, and I will post it out there so everybody can get in the next challenge if they're interested.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're having 10 images to look at this time. We're just going to go alphabetically and start with Kong. Now, Kong is out on the Discord a lot, and if you guys are looking for an art community, the Discord has 900,000 people out there. It's very active. A good group of people to hang out with and get ideas and inspiration from. So you can find a link to that in the video description text. Oh, he says, I know this isn't final by any means, but I was really trying to play around with the first composition I had. I wish I had the chance to work on it more, but I got hindered by circumstances outside my control. This is definitely not the end of the piece, and I plan on working on it once I get back on my feet again. Thanks for the challenge critiques. Yeah, so Kong completely changed the direction on their image. Their last image was just like it's too far out away from the character. It didn't have quite the impact we're looking for this challenge. So they created an entirely new scene, and that did put them behind, and that's completely understandable. And for a challenge like that, that is what we prioritize: is the artistic growth rather than the finished image. Because although this is created to be like a actual commission, there isn't any particular, you know, fallout for not meeting the deadline, right? I mean, just whatever, you push yourself as much as you want to and learn the best way that you need to. So what about this one? Did you feel like this was a more successful approach to the image, or did it hit you a different way?
Yes, just first things first, when I looked at it earlier today, I just looking from how it was before in the first round, I think it's much more improved.
Mm-hmm.
Especially it's much more readable as a card size, which I think is a really important
Yes.
thing about this.
Yes.
So good on you, Kong, for that. It's much more readable. Um, I like the sort of perspective angle you're going for, sort of bringing in more dynamism. You can see the
Mm-hmm.
almost like the skylight with all the books going down. Um, the only thing I would say for that though, and you might need to help me with this, Clint, is for the perspective. I don't would the foreground look that way if it's such like a steep perspective angle looking up? I'm not so sure though.
Yeah, in order to get anything like this, and I think that's one of the things we're talking about on this one, is because Kong is
Mm,
utilizing a rather unusual perspective angle.
yeah.
Most people don't shoot for this very often, but it is one that totally makes sense to use for this particular image. Um, and that is this uber low, like camera on the floor sort of
Yeah.
level. So let's walk through a couple of things with that. Well, he is using primarily the 1 point perspective. And that's right, because we're looking down, basically looking down kind of a hallway where everything is going down to a point. You don't have multiple. However, what we have is the floor angling down from this side and the floor angling up from that side. And so we're really stuck between him using actually two different uh, perspective styles. And let me show you kind of the difference so that makes sense. I'm sure that there might be a better term. It's just not occurring to me what it would be. Normally, if you had, say, the flat ground, it would just be going something like that. It wouldn't be angling up on either side. Otherwise, you would actually be having the character sitting in some sort of V shape on the floor. And then you would have your lines coming up like that. And that makes sense. I mean that's pretty close. However, I think what he's trying to go for is more of the fisheye bend.
Oh.
And that's something that you may see more often in, let's say, manga. Even anime uses that a bit more. But if you're going to go with a classic and the non-fish eye, then what you may consider doing is actually dropping it so that the floor is more like this. And then everything just comes to this floor. Like the hand would be right there. The hand would be like this because the camera is literally on the floor. And this bookcase would come straight down, would come all the way down and meet the floor. All right, that would be one thing. But if you're doing the fisheye thing, then let's pick this. There's some point at which it remains flat, and I had to do this on a recent piece. It takes a minute to get your head around it, but it starts bending like this. And so you can't use straight lines, and that's where it gets confusing. Because you're used to using straight lines with perspective. But on a fisheye, it doesn't. It distorts. And so you're going to be getting lines that go like that. But then you're also going to have it vertically as well, right? So how would that work vertically? Can you describe that to me?
Oh no. How oh no. How would that work? I think the best bet if you want to do something like this is just mock it up in a 3D program and because like sometimes in those programs you can also change the perspective angles or like
Mm-hmm.
edit the reference. I don't know. I couldn't be able to say just on
So
the
you
top of
had
my
no
head.
3D program and you had to figure it
Oh
out. What would
no.
you do?
If we were in the olden days, how would I
Yeah.
figure it out? I would I don't know, just take time to do calculations. I'm lost here.
Okay, one thing that you can do, if you do have access to search engine, is go look for a perspective guide. Oh, that has
Oh,
smoothing
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
There are some good warped perspective manga guides that just have the sort of grid, and that can be a starting point.
Oh.
Now, they don't always have the angle that you're actually looking for, or sometimes they're not perfect, but it might help get your head around what's going on. Now, for these, there's going to be some point at which it won't warp. There's some point in the middle that doesn't have any warp to it. We'll call it
Mhm.
there. Now, these are also trying to go to some point, right? We'll call it, where are they pointing to? I guess it's like right off, just right about there. Those are all pointing at something like that. And so essentially, you've got the same sort of thing this way, that you have one point going that way and everybody's running here. Now, this one is going to start warping as well, and it's going to begin warping around here. It wants to warp out further and further and further with this sort of bend, where it really bends on the outside and begins bending less and less as it comes in like this. And then you have to start making sure that all of your straight bookcases actually follow the curvature of the fisheye lens. This is definitely one that you want to put some guidelines in for, otherwise, it's going to get out of hand really quickly.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, even so, like, it might be there might be an even higher level of difficulty here because the bookshelves are designed to be curved. They're like
Mm-hmm.
winding, curvy. I mean, the books are straight, right? Because they're books, but the yeah, it
Yeah, but
strikes me as
the
it's already
entire thing
warbly.
is curved.
So you need to think about the warbly lines on the perspective. So it's like double double complexity, I would say.
Yeah, for these, you may try doing straight lines. Basically, do a straight line to get the starting point and the ending point of the
Right.
curve, and then you curve it in between. So if I can say, if it's something like this, and I go, okay, well, it's got to start the curve here and end the curve there, and I'm going to say it's going to have that much curve. And then I want to copy about that same curve on each of these. I get a little less each time because it's getting closer to the
Right.
point. It would take a lot of time to actually work that out. It could be done, and even if it wasn't perfect, uh, you could probably sketch it out close enough that a viewer would buy it and understand what was going on. It's not like they're going to check it against anything.
Right.
And it would already match up pretty well with the character because even the reference images over here, like this is using a really foreshortened perspective anyway. And so the hand looks, like physically, the hand is almost twice the size of the head,
Yeah.
space wise. And so he would mesh into that sort of perspective quite well. And you could leave him almost the same. I would adjust maybe making this other hand a little bigger. And there was another note on his anatomy. Do watch on this, Kong, that this forearm over here that's reaching to us, that is going to be highly cylindrical. You have it sort of flattened off, but we're almost seeing it from the front, which means that those contour lines are almost going to be completely circular, right? We probably do want to get a better look at these folds. Even though this cloak and that shirt are different, the pattern of those folds is really going to give you a lot more information about how that's going to work. And you could also think about just getting a cloak with some hood on it, or just a hoodie with long sleeves and push the sleeves up a bit. And it's going to give you a lot more information about what those folds need to look like. Okay, I want to toss you another question. As far as the books, I wasn't reading that quite the way that I would expect to see from what the challenge is about. And the challenge is about, if you haven't joined on the previous episode for the viewers, the challenge is about a intruder in this fantasy library, and the books are enchanted to go attack anybody that is intruding that isn't supposed to be there. So there's all these books flying off the shelf to attack the person and drive them out. And that's what's going on. But here I'm getting almost more of a books just kind of falling off the shelf. They don't seem maybe animated
Yes.
or attacking. What was your
Yeah.
thought there?
Yeah, actually, I wish I could like show if I had camera, I could show you in my notes. The note it says the books look like they're falling.
Hmm.
There should be more purpose to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think the keyword here is the purpose. It's
Yes.
these have almost like a mind of their own. They've been enchanted. They have magical energies within them, sort of. So they have a purpose and they have a goal and they want to attack this guy. And I actually got to talk a little bit with Kong about it, and I told him sort of try and you could even think of they could be like I don't know, like seagulls or some sort of birds or sort of trying to attack you to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Those when you see pictures of them and stuff, you see the purpose in how they're sort of winding up to get to where you are.
Yes.
And I think that could be uh, really shown sort of in this sort of spiral and how they're going down with the pages and such, designing it in a way where you see them sort of like a bird again, like plunging down as they're sort of diving from the top shelf to
Mm-hmm.
go and get this guy in the foreground. So yeah, I think again the keyword here is purpose, is giving them again, like I said last time, like these are characters almost in their own
Hmm.
way. So give them a purpose. They're not an sort of an object just falling down. Um, yeah, that was my note on it.
I think that's a good point. You do have to think about them as characters. In this case, try to think of something that you can do to make them beyond just a normal book that's falling. And can you add something to it in order to give them a little personality? Something
Yeah.
that comes to my mind is in Harry Potter, the second one, where they drive the car, and then Ron gets the letter from his mom. It's a particular kind of letter that when you open it up, it animates and it changes shape and it begins talking to you and it conveys what the letter says. Uh, but it's like really loud and blows up after it gives its message. I can't remember what that was called. The loading. Anyway, go take a look at that. There was, yeah, it wasn't a screamer. There was a certain term for it. It's been a while since I watched that one. I usually watch the other ones.
I
Uh,
wouldn't be able to help. Is it like an animated sort of telegram in a way or something like that? Or
yeah, it's a letter that he opens it and then it like folds into being a face with a mouth, and the inner piece of paper becomes the tongue and the teeth. And howler, yeah, it was called a howler. And go take a look at that and also look up the concept art for it and see how they got something like an envelope and how they created a sort of face and animated it to do this articulation. And see if you can't get that same sort of idea and apply that to a book and see if you can get that to come up with something. I think that would be a good direction. So overall perspective, I think, is working. The overall composition is working. Double check the perspective. I'm gonna ask if you can take the time to figure out a more aggressive way that they're all coming down in an attacking way, and also maybe getting rid of this front book because it looks more like, if I were to glance at it, that it would he's reaching out to it like that's going to be the thing that saves him. That's what he's trying to reach. Where it ought to be reading as this is the thing that's trying to eat him, so he's probably not reaching his hand into its mouth. So we could leave that blank, um, unless he's reaching for, I don't know, a magic wand or a knife or a hatchet or something. He's trying to reach
oh,
for a
right.
weapon. That would make a little more sense.
Um, if you don't mind, I have a
Mm-hmm.
tiny little comment. It would be mostly just if you do leave the book or if you have a different prop or something in the foreground, sort of the characters kind of having an interaction with this foreground element, regardless of what it is, I would just put the sort of, what do you call it, the eye line, sort of where he's looking with his pupils. I would angle the pupils a little bit towards sort of, I guess it would be a little bit extra, just tiny little nudges to the right, so that it looks like he's actually looking at the character or the object in the foreground. To me, I don't know, at first glance it read like he's looking sort of to the side, like he's not quite looking up at the books that are coming down at him, and he's not quite looking at the book in the foreground. So I would just say either have him looking up completely or sort of looking more directly at, yeah, at the foreground prop or whatever that could be. Especially because, like, if you follow his eyesight where it is at the moment, is sort of pointing you behind his hand, which is just the bookshelf. Like there's nothing
Mm-hmm.
that's a threat to him where he's looking. So yeah, that would be my other comment. Um,
Yeah, I'm with you. If you do have a character's eye completely visible, so you can follow their eye line, make sure that they're looking at something that's going to be of interest to the viewer. Unless you're doing one of these 1,000-yard stares where the character's just
Right.
standing there looking into the distant, heroically. That's not the same thing. Uh, but even here, like on this book, I mean, you can have the thread thing bookmark that comes in books. The yeah, I guess it's a little
Page
ribbon.
marker?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
little ribbon that's in some books.
Okay.
That could be a tongue. And then on the edges, some of the pages could turn up on the outside, and maybe they wrinkle up on the ends. And so it gets almost a teeth impression with the way that the pages wrinkle up. Or maybe they're torn on the end, and the edges of the paper are all torn, also mimicking a sort of teeth pattern. And that you could have multiple layers of them, creating this sort of really jaggedy, lots of sharp little shapes coming off. And maybe there's bits of paper just flying out of its mouth, where it's almost eating itself up as it's trying to get to the guy. Now, these are the sort of things that I would be throwing around in my head of trying to ramp this up so that a viewer would immediately see these as attacking, threatening creatures or objects. Yeah, they're enchanted. Okay, I did notice in the chat it looks like maybe Hobbit has. If you guys have
Yes.
uploaded something to the wrong folder, shoot me a message on Discord. Is it Hobbit that's missed one?
Yes, Hobbit is talking in the chat that perhaps it's like a misclick or something, but she tried to upload it to the folder and it just didn't realize. Yeah, I've just double checked and it's not in the folder for me,
Okay,
so
Hobbit, just shoot me a message on Discord and add your image into the message, and then as I'll take a break a moment later, and I'll go out there and just pull it off, and we'll take a look at it.
yes. Don't worry about it, Hobbit.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Next one we're going to be. Oh yeah, that was the one from last week. Daniel's is the one that he sent in last week. We're not going to look at that. He had
Yeah.
sent it into the wrong folder last time. So we're going to be taking a look at Hisham. I think I remember knowing that that was not the way you pronounce it, but I don't remember how these.
Well, I also say Hisham, so we might be both wrong on that.
Okay, so a couple of comments here. It says, this was a fun challenge for me. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity. Took notes and suggestions you, Nito, mentioned in the first checkpoint. Did my best to make the composition and feel of the piece better. There's a lot more for me to learn. If there's anything that you have in mind that I can work on for future projects, I'd love to hear it. Thank you again. Okay, well, on the last one, we basically had your scene up here. It was basically that scene. And we'd said we probably need to either tilt it up or tilt it down with the camera angle. And it feels like you kind of did that. It feels like you basically just cropped in, but you didn't really change the angle that you're viewing the subject at. Right? Because if you actually move the camera down, we would be getting different forms. We would be getting a different angle on these forms.
hmm
And I don't think that's what I'm reading here. For one of the things, and I've mentioned this one before, and I've got to mention it again because it's a real telltale sign. And that is the horizon line on this image is somewhere up here. It's about there on this image. That we're looking down on everything lower than that, and we're looking up at everything over that. So that means the horizon line has to be about. And that means, of course, that we're looking downwards on the curvature of the belt. Now, this is where he's having his brain is having trouble. Belt
The
is supposed
belts.
to go down, and it does. And then it comes back up because we're looking up at it. And then it comes down because we're looking down on it because it's a
Yeah.
belt. And then it comes back up. And so this is happening all across the chest, all across the abdomen. And the brain is fighting to try to understand and rationalize what angle you're seeing all of this at. And what angle should we be seeing that at, or what sort of curvature should we be seeing there, Nito?
Should be curving up.
Absolutely.
It's just, yeah, I think a really nice way to just think about it is just think of the core or the torso of the character as a cylinder
Mm-hmm.
or like a toilet roll, you know what I mean? And even if you need it like in real life, you can grab one of these items and just tilt it up
Yep.
and you can sort of see it's a little cheat of seeing how the ellipses are going to curve up.
Yeah, just grab a water bottle, take a
Yeah.
look at it, because that's basically going to be a stand-in for the torso. Exactly what you were saying, and
Yeah.
just kind of look at the angle that you catch it at. And if you're a little lower than it, it's going to be a very slight curve. But if you're a lot lower than it, it's going to be very curved, more like a circle. And so here, this is a good example of the sort of difficulty you get into when you are having to make up too much form without any good reference for it. Like this reference image over here is not of the perspective that we're using in the image. And so it looks like Hisham is kind of looking at this and trying to get some points from it, but doesn't actually follow the pose or the anatomy. And so some of the things are being used, but some of them aren't. And this is where it goes back to just go take a photo. Because one photograph, you can take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, go take a photograph, and it is going to answer 90% of the problems that are going on right here with the whole pose and anatomy and the curvature and all of that. So, one of the first things that I have to, advise to a lot of artists, stepping up through their skills is professionals will take the time to do that. And you're going to end up spending 5 to 10 times the amount of time trying to play around with it and get it right than if you just went out and got the image that you needed to get the answer. Now, sometimes I still find myself like, I'll just figure it out. I'll just wing it. I'll just wing it. And then it's like you have to slap yourself and like, well, I can literally have the answer in 5 minutes
Yeah.
if I just go
Yeah.
do it. I mean, are
The
you the same
never
way? Do
ending.
you ever have to talk yourself into actually doing it?
Yeah, I need to stop myself and be like, why am I taking the most difficult route when I could literally everybody at this point has like a smartphone or something that
Mm-hmm.
has a camera and has a timer to it, and you can put the smartphone on the floor and then stand up. You can
Yep.
do all sorts of different perspectives and things, and sometimes people though, and I would like to point this out, is you're like, oh, but I don't look like my character at all, right? Or you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, my character is really muscular and I have no muscle. You can still get valuable information by just
Oh yeah.
posing, like regardless of how you look like. It's
Mm-hmm.
just do it and then try it out and don't stress over getting the most perfect photo or the most high quality thing. Just it's just for you. You know what I mean? It's something that you need to tell yourself is nobody else is gonna see it, but it's gonna help you with your art.
Right.
So go crazy with it.
Yeah.
It's
Anything to work off of is going to give you more than what you had.
yeah.
And like you say, Nito, I mean, I use myself as a reference all the time, but I have nowhere near the physique of a lot of the characters that I illustrate. Maybe some are inhumans, maybe some are female, somebody, really muscular. But if you
Yeah.
know a little bit about anatomy, you can just start adding muscle onto something. But what you're mainly looking for is are they, are the shoulders tilted up from this side to that side? Am I
Right.
can I see the collarbone from this angle? How far is the chest turned away? Does the belt go up or down? These sort of things will largely stay the same because those are skeletal issues. and then you can add muscle or fat or extend limbs or whatever, and it's not usually going to change the musculature that much.
Yeah. I mean, and on that, just quickly, it's not only just you and your pose, is if you want to do some sort of part of the costume, it's flowing in the wind. Look
Mm-hmm.
at your curtains or grab a napkin and just fold it up, and you can use anything as a stand-in for
Yep.
reference.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just it's hard. It's a never-ending battle with. I mean, I guess there's something inside of all of us, like our pride as an artist or something. It will be damaged if we use reference, but it's the best thing you can do, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it is. And I mean, this is great. It's great sometimes. I do want to say this to kind of offset what we're saying. It can be
Hmm.
good to go do as much as you can with minimal reference, just to push
Yeah.
yourself to kind of see where you are and where you need to study. Uh, but if you're really trying to get the most out of the image, then guess as little as possible. And then you just want to do a really cool fantasy version of whatever that thing.
Right.
Now, like this, I just went out to sketchfab.com, looked up moose head. Somebody had a 3D model of a moose head, and you can
Right.
just turn it around in your browser. Don't even have to download anything, and boom, I know what angle, you know, that moose head should be at, and I know what that should look like. And also helps me tell, okay, well, the horns look like they're coming out from around the eye. The ear looks like it's below that. Okay, cool. That tells me where those need to be. And then it also gives me what? That other antler, because that can be really confusing
Yeah.
about, okay, well, it's coming out on the other side of the head, but then it's also kind of curving up and out at the same time. These sort of models, even if they're not perfect and not exactly the same kind of antler, it can give you really valuable information to figure out that sort of angle and form with the perspective. What else? Oh yeah, that was a sketch. I just put the sketch over there. Yeah, so this is it. If you haven't been out there, it is a place where you can buy 3D models for your stuff, but you can pull them all up in your browser and just turn them around and look at them, and that's completely free, and that's for anybody. It's not a sponsor or anything, but Sketchfab. And there's been many times it's been something like that, where it's been, an alligator or a moose or some sort of statue or whatever, and I just needed something to look at. It didn't have to be perfect. I could fudge the rest of it, but I need something to work from, and that can be a really good resource. Anything else you wanted to add to that? Otherwise, I'm just going to be moving on.
Um. Yeah. Just sort of what could happen moving forward with the piece. I just had a couple of things. I think we kind of mentioned this last week, and it's the chains.
Mm-hmm.
They might look a little bit too thin for, especially like on that arm, that really muscular arm. The chains might read a little bit too either small, and that could lead to them reading as weak.
Mm-hmm.
It could is the word here, because maybe it does read, but to me, they look a little bit weak for that exact reason. And I think just like, how could you say, like, make them a little bit thicker, or yeah, kind of. I see you drawing them now on the stream.
Yeah,
It's just
especially the ones
increase
next
the
to the
size.
camera, right? I mean, those are
Yeah,
going to look
yeah.
pretty big.
The closer ones to camera, like you're kind of doing that on the top right one as it's getting closer, and then it's getting smaller as it's going back. But yeah, again, just like with the books and stuff, like reading the brief and what it's about. And here I think center stage, yes, the Minotaur because he's getting attacked, but center stage is the chains really. Um
Yeah, it
so yeah,
has to be what's taking place with the chains. I think that's
yeah,
an important note here is that it really is about this Minotaur right now, and it has to be about what's happening to the Minotaur
yeah,
and not the character. So getting those chains a lot bigger, a lot clearer. We need to be able to read the chains and the links from the little view, from the print view size. And also make sure that that blue is coming through. This reference you have over here, this sort of magical translucent blue hands, that's the sort of blue and magic translucency that we're looking for. And we notice that how much more saturation those have. In order to get them that way, we have to get them a bit darker. We actually have to get a little darker so that we can get some color in there. And then if you want a core of it to be a little bit lighter, you can have some lighter bits in there. But otherwise, we need a lot more color out of them.
Yes. That was, again, I'm pointing and being like, yes, that is exactly, yeah, it's just the size and the color. And I think that was it from, oh, well, yeah, I did want to ask you on that quickly is, um, at what point in sort of the process or something like an illustration like this do you sort of say, okay, now it's time for me to get the material reading correctly? Is it sort of from the start sketch stage, or when you're going to render or paint over stuff that you're like, okay, now I should really differentiate sort of the metals from the leathers and those things?
That's definitely going to be on one of the later stages.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to define composition and the pose and the character design and the value scheme and the color scheme and block it all in. And then I might start being concerned about the material rendering. Because
Okay.
it's a sort of thing of priority. If the
Yeah.
material rendering isn't great, is it going to keep the image from being understandable? No.
Right.
But if
Yeah.
the composition isn't good, that will completely undermine the image. If the value scheme isn't good, that could completely undermine the image. If the color scheme, not as much as values, but it really could put the image off-putting and make it lackluster. So you always want to put the major things first, the things that can completely make or break the image. And then the things that are less important, and as much as I love material rendering, uh, it isn't the thing that's going to make or break an image.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to put that down there after everything else has been situated and I know that those are working well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was just saying, especially because in the text, Hisham was asking sort of what should he be focusing on for his next pieces and those kinds of things. And I think you said it beautifully there is just the first stages of the illustration process are what should always be sort of practiced,
Mm-hmm.
sort of nailing those down first before going for the materials and all these different things.
And sometimes you don't know what the solution is. Sometimes you do as much as you can and you know that it could be better and you don't know what it is. So you move on. And sometimes that's what you do. But if you do know that, hey, it's not really where it needs to be, then make sure that you stay on whatever stage that is and take care of that before you
Mm,
move on.
right. Hopefully that
Okay.
answers your question, Hisham.
So, Joakim is up
Oh,
next. And I don't get
yes.
quite the throaty thing that Anna can get because English does not use any sound near that sound. And I'm not used to making that sound.
Yeah, Joakim. Joakim.
Joakim.
Yes.
I know.
He's in the chat. He's in the chat.
Okay, a lot of progress on this one. Still keeping it
Yes.
within the black and white. And this is kind of what we were talking about just now, which is make sure that the composition, values, poses are all working well
Yeah.
before you necessarily try to jump into the color. And of course, if this was an actual commission, you'd probably want to throw some color on there for the company to know what you're doing with it. But for this is all about you improving as an artist.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm getting a good action feel out of this. I'm getting a sense of
Yeah.
motion. I like the energy of the chain shooting up. But I also feel like maybe some of this is being underutilized, or maybe some of it's getting kind of like heavy blacks in the blacks, heavy lights in the lights, and I don't know. How did the whole image hit you? Any kind of top level feedback you'd put?
Um, okay, ideas and things that I have. For some reason, just in the composition and from the first read, if you don't mind
Mm-hmm.
commenting on that quickly, is the in the especially moving from the thumbnail to now, the I assume it's the moon or the sun. Um, it's sort of quite smaller in size now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could work, but it's getting a little bit too close to the head and like the edge there. I don't know. It kind of it read a little bit weird to me on first glance. So I would say maybe put that into consideration a little bit as you're moving forward. And like you were saying, it's a little underutilized because the you're drawing a face on on the moon. Um, the left, almost the whole left third of the image is just it's there's no action taking place in there, or there's nothing that's happening in there. Um, and I think what could be used, yeah, like you're doing in the stream, but if you cut it there, it's just going to be a square. So perhaps sort of grabbing the action and the minotaur and this sort of very specific, almost like pyramid triangle shape, and moving it, scooting it over ever so slightly towards that that part of the painting. Maybe that could solve it to a certain extent.
Basically
um,
shifting the main action part over to the left, you're thinking?
To the left. Yeah, but just either nudging it or sort of, I don't know, because sometimes you do want to have some rest areas again between the
Mm-hmm.
actions, so it's not everything so convoluted. But I think, yeah, like you're doing it now, that could also work because you're utilizing a little bit more of the space, but you're not just filling it up per se with new things and adding more to it. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I think, yeah, it's just again thinking of, like, I pick up the card, for example, for this minotaur, and you put it down on the table, and the person that's fighting against you or something uh might be, what is it? What is happening here? Because everything is so small. I
Mm-hmm.
think with, yeah, just doing that, cuz I was thinking either just doing that or sort of cropping in, but I think if you crop in, you're going to lose that foreground that is working so well with the sort of action of the chains spurting from the ground. So I think this
Yeah,
works
let's try
better.
that. I'll grab a bit of it here,
Mm.
and we can't crop in and see if that gives much of it.
Um. Oh yeah. Also, Joakim says he's really sorry about not putting a comment on the box, and he sent me a quick comment to read out if you
Oh,
wouldn't
too
mind.
late. What's he got?
Oh, okay. Yeah, he says, "Hi Clint, I hope this piece works for you. I did lower the view and tilted the angle from last time. It was not easy and I needed a 3D model to get it, which I think there's nothing wrong with that." And then he says, "I know it still needs work and I think I would now start to use color on it. What do you think of the scene, Clint? Is there too much happening with the chains?"
I kind of like the first suggestion. Yeah, I almost like seeing foot there with the chain coming out in the foreground. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of going for that one, which is the more shifted to the left, and I think a little more work with the values, and then you could probably
Yeah.
be moving on to the colors pretty soon. My main thing is that a lot of it is getting really similar in value in all the darks, and
Mm.
that generally you want to keep things more in the midtones if possible. If I run a Gaussian blur on it, even a moderate one, and then I get that little, I start losing, like, If I didn't know that was a character, I probably wouldn't know that's even a character.
Right. I see what
Because
you mean.
this is one of those times that the silhouette of the character is completely non understandable from a silhouette. And sometimes you can't get around that, but we should be able to use lighting and value in some way that we can distinguish the limbs from each other and get a sense of the body, as well as all of this stuff in here all starts to be kind of the same complexity, values, that sort of thing. So what we're looking to do is introduce more midtones, more values of something in order to help separate this stuff out. And probably doing the same thing with the background because a lot of this is about the same as well. The sky and the clouds and we do have some more options. I mean, you can have a darker sky back there, and we have to think about how we're going to make these chains show up as well, because we have these chains at about the same value as the sky that they're overlapping. We might think about, can we get a bit more value into the skies so that those chains can show up? And overall, it doesn't need to be very much darker, but a little bit darker may help them pop pretty well. And with the whole way that this scene is broken down, I'd say probably the simplest answer would be to make it where things in the distance basically get lighter, things in the foreground are darker. So this foreground foot, I would actually let be quite a bit darker, and then the values around it there in the background would be getting lighter, and those are more mid-tone. So I'd be treating it a bit more like that. Things that are further away, we're just doing a really simple atmospheric. Closer things are darker, further things are lighter. And you could put some silhouette on those, on that foot, so that shows up like that. And then basically doing kind of a Brahm lighting where it gets dark on the edges, but then it gets a little bit lit in the middle from this chain, but it would be like a really vibrant, more saturated blue. And that would make the character show up better, even just like that. And we're looking at maybe adding the sun, letting the sun be higher so that we can get more light over top and hit that
Yeah.
arm, and that would help it show up, and maybe getting more light across this other arm so that there's a little value distinction between the arm and the body. I don't know that we need other heel thing there. Might keep it simpler if that arm can just show up again the sky rather than trying to work out its value again.
Yeah.
Same thing down here, we could add some light. And I would beef up that arm and that shoulder.
Beef him up, Joakim.
uh, and something here with the anatomy, really be trying to find some reference for shoulder blades. I think you're going to be getting the shoulder blades a lot more visible here. I would go look at photos of bodybuilders from the back, right, as they're flexing. Check out those shoulder blades. So go look up if you can find like world's strongest man
Yeah, the strongman
competitions.
competitions. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, they're not super ripped, but they're just super powerful, and that's kind of more the physique that we've got on this guy.
they're more beefy.
Yeah.
This is
And
reading much better now.
that should have a better overall read.
Yeah.
It might be
Oh,
that most of that's
um, is that the second horn, or is it a it might be my screen, or is it the a chain?
Where?
behind his back. Oh, it's
Oh,
a
that's a
chain. Never mind.
chain coming
Yeah,
up.
it's
The
doing
other
the
horn
same
is
exact thing as the horn.
now.
So
The horn is something I would probably play up because that back horn is so small.
yeah,
Uh,
I lost it when I was looking
I would see about
at
just
the stream.
beefing that thing up so you've got something more heroic in the shape.
Fantasy it up.
Yeah, yeah. Just more fantasy, more volume to it. Better
Um,
shape. And the same
would
sort of thing with the. Sorry, I'll let
oh
you.
no 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 go on.
It's just finding some sort of maybe more interesting shape along the edge, making like spikes coming off of the shoulder pieces, just so it has
Yes,
a little character and breaks that shape up from just being a monotonous curve all the way down.
yeah.
Um,
If you're already fantasying up the horns, fantasy up the armor as well.
mm-hmm.
Go all out. Yeah, just the again with what I was saying before, the chain that's behind him, sort of closer to the sky. Would you change the shape of it a little bit so it doesn't mimic so much the horn, or would you do you think it works?
I'm not even sold on that chain. I was looking at that earlier. The one coming out in front of him to come up around him. I
Yeah,
almost like the idea that they're all coming at him from behind
right.
and not
Just
necessarily from the front. I would consider just taking that one out altogether. And if I had one, I would think maybe coming in from the other side over here. Maybe coming out of that wall right here. You've got like rocks flying out from right there. And it's snaking up this way or something.
I like what Joakim was doing with the sort of the explosions, how
Oh,
they're
yeah.
sort of erupting from the earth. Like he really took that advice to heart. So thank you for that, Joakim. Um,
This change, we are adjusting it. We're going to probably see a lot bigger chain on that side.
mm,
We moved it over, so we had to stretch it out. But
yeah.
because we stretched it out, we also need to let that have better perspective there. Yeah. Then after you feel like that's balanced out pretty well, then I would just move over to start working on the color ideas.
Yes. Oh, Joachim has just put in the chat. He's tagged you, but in a different message. It says, "What about the one that goes over the body?" So I guess the one
Oh
that's
yeah,
in
I
the
mean I didn't
torso.
paint it out, but that would be the one continued up, and I would consider taking.
Mm.
Unless you wanted to, we want to take that one out, but not have this one.
Yeah, I think the silhouette is reading much better now
I
with the
I
bigger
almost
horn.
want to see it wrapping more around him, so I get a better three-dimensional feel of what it's doing.
Oh,
I'm
right.
almost feeling like if it was looping more around him like that, and maybe it's like doing this enveloping thing where it's like going between his legs and then it's shooting up around him like this or something, then that feels a little more engaging. You could have one maybe from this side coming up here and you could see it like looping around this side and looping up from around the arm back over kind of that way. And then you can see the end of it looping back around where it, it's looped, but it hasn't tightened yet. And so you got a couple of those that are in that situation where they're still making their tie. Okay, moving on. Neil is up next. Okay. Uh, Neil has been putting in a lot of time. That
Yeah.
is very obvious. A lot of time, and this is, I think, a good example of how to get to that sort of level. Is that you look at the iterations. A lot of it's just the iterations and going through the steps. You can look at all the thumbnails and see how they're working out the ideas. So much of the information being conveyed through just the thumbnail. No
Yeah.
details, no colors, no values. It's just the poses, the composition, the arrangement, and you can get the idea of what's going on in this scene. And just taking the time, playing around with the value schemes, playing around with the color schemes, making sure they have a lot of reference. Look at that. Photo reference for every character with multiple references for the faces. And look at the results. There's a direct correlation there. uh,
Yes.
okay, general impression of this one before we get into details of improvement.
Well, general first impression is Nelly or Nelle. I don't know how you would pronounce your name, but you got the illustration process down. I
Hmm.
think this is a big takeaway from this. Probably already knew it, but you've got the process down. I really like it. I like that from the previous week that we checked in with Nele. She's gone for more of like the background. This is much more like illustrative, and the idea that it's the background is just mostly blue hued,
Hmm.
and that really helps. Like again, at a card size, it helps it read
Yes.
really nicely.
Yes.
Just the blue and then the characters. So I love that. I have it here just to say because I didn't know if you would be against it, Clint, but I love it.
No, I think
Um,
that is a sign of a really good illustrator's choice.
yeah, yeah,
And is it realistic? Probably not.
no, yeah,
But does it read really well and work really well for a small card? 100%.
yeah,
And a lot of people have a hard time making that choice and sticking to it. But it's done really well here. I'm going to push it slightly one other way. I think might improve, but um, overall, this is excellent.
yeah,
Definitely, it is a professional quality. And if they aren't already picking up work or looking for work, now is the time when you need to start doing it. Because I think what you mentioned, they understand the illustrative process.
yeah, and it shows.
Yeah, and knowing the workflow and being able to follow that workflow and get a quality image out of the end is super important. Otherwise, it's like rolling the dice and like, well, I don't know if it'll work out or not. And that's how a lot of people treat it because they don't follow a workflow. They can't stick to it. They don't have the patience to. But I think they do. And I'm going to encourage go ahead and go out there and try to find some work. Uh, you'll never be, you'll never feel like you're good enough until you earn that position. Uh, so you'll always feel like you're faking it. I mean, for years, you'll feel like you're faking it. And so the only way to get over that is to actually get the work and do the work. And you'll end up learning a lot more that way than just studying on your own and trying to outguess what you're going to be asked to do. As far as improvements, anything come to mind for you?
um, yeah, just a quick comment, mostly on, and I think I saw Nele and other folk in the Discord sort of chatting about this. It would be just my 2 cents on it, and it's sort of the expressions. And I was of the understanding that Nele felt like the expressions could read a little cartoonish or
Hmm.
something. Like they were saying that, oh, perhaps this is not MTG style because of the expressions and whatnot. And again, yeah, just my without delaying it, my thoughts on this is I think you have a pretty well understanding of these expressions. The only thing would be just, and it's tricky, and it's finding the balance between sort of having an expression looked sort of forced, and also almost, I like to call it like the the stock photo
Mm-hmm.
expressions, because they look, faked, and having a more natural expression. And I think mostly with the man in the top right, in the foreground on the right, you're in that sort of very thin balancing act between it looking sort of stock photo, but you've pulled it off really nice in a way where it does also read sort of natural. And I think that comes from all the references Nelly was using.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say, if you're looking for Nelly, just trying to find these sorts of good expressions that might not look like stock photo-ish, look at movies, like horror movies, and then not so much the cheesy ones, but more of like the actual horror movies, and take a look at the actors, and how they're expressing sort of this fear, and these sorts of things. And it I think, yeah, just looking at movies, or motion pictures and videos of these expressions helps much more than looking at a sort of looking on Google like surprised face, because then
Yeah.
you're gonna get lots of these stock photos.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
almost
what do you
want to
think about
find it can almost be more worthwhile to find a video of
Yeah.
someone having that expression going through the expression and you
Yeah.
pause it at a point
Mhm.
because it's going to be through a natural movement and not just okay, look frightened,
Pose.
hold it,
Yeah.
click. Because that's not the
Yeah.
way that we express. We don't hold the emotion on our face for extended times. It Our expression is constantly moving. So consider doing that, or just video yourself. You
Yeah.
know, but then
Doing
go back and look at the video frame by frame and see how it's working. The muscles are pulling and everything across the face.
Yeah. Yeah. That could help you a lot with the expression, because you've got the idea down. It might just be a thing of, again, looking at a video, look at a horror movie, at an actor or something, and you'll see that's where, like, from video and movies and things, that's where you get the little, what's it called in English, like the minutia
Mm-hmm.
of these tiny little changes, that it's just the tiny little changes that make the big difference between sort of a posed expression and sort of an animated, more real expression. Hopefully that can help you, Nele. Um,
Yeah, and those changes, man,
they get you.
they can be really, really subtle, and you can work on them for a freaking long time before you get something
Yeah.
that feels right. But
Yeah.
I do think that these are probably usable, printable.
Yeah.
Um, I think most companies and most directors would be completely on board with using them. They may be more critical if it was a iconic character. It was a
Mm,
well-known character.
right.
But for a general, basically NPC character, they they're not usually as critical. Like the eyebrows getting really hard down. I would come in here and just make a few tweaks to move it slightly more into
Yeah.
the realism side and away from cartoony. But the level of cartoony, I think, is being handled really well.
Yeah.
It's almost more of your Norman Rockwell sort of exaggerated, but not cartoony.
Mm, yeah. It's still much more sort of grounded in realism. That's true. That could be also a good thing to reference, Nelly, if you aren't
Hmm.
already referencing just Rockwell illustrations.
Yeah, see how he sort of pulled those off and look at his studies. There, I'm just trying to ease back some of it, and I'm looking at like the quality here. You have the mouth. The mouth is almost, if you covered up the rest of the face, actually, we
Mm.
could see it. It's almost like we're seeing the mouth directly from the front.
Yeah.
If you didn't have anything else to reference it against, that's almost from the front. but it should be from a 3/4 view. And so that's what I was trying to do with the little change, is get it shifted over so that you're going to have a bit of a different, instead of it coming down like that, you're actually going to see it sink in a bit on that far side. You're going to have more of that shape rather than just an even. And that's a little thing that wasn't really one of my major notes or anything talking about it. Okay, so other things. Okay, most of this I am completely happy with, and there's really no need to talk about it. It's rendered very well. I like the character designs. Um, the the tone difference between basically warmer tones in the foreground and cooler tones in the background, that's working nicely. Something I would consider is just, I feel like maybe we underestimated the thickness of the lat, the shoulder, because I'm thinking I'll go into that later. Wait, let me. If that neck is coming down here, I'm expecting that lat to be right about here with the shoulder. And we're just not getting enough thickness where he's obviously got an undershirt, and then this shirt, and then this vest, and then the armor piece on top of it, and it's simply not thick enough to account for all that on top of the skin. And that's where I just got that piece. I just ran a warp on it to make it a little, elongated that direction. And I pushed it up, and I feel like anatomy-wise, I'm better. And
yeah, I see now. It's better.
Also made same change on the other side, but less. So I brought that up here a little bit, and because we're losing the window and shirt edge, I darkened the window a little bit, and just let it be light around the edges. See in this image up here they did that. It gets light around the edges of the metal, and then the middle part's actually darker. And so using a cue off of that, and so those edges read a little bit. Exposure, I would push exposure in some of this area, and I'll turn that on and off, and you can see the difference here. The first thing is on him. A lot of these tones, just having had things printed on the cards before, I know that a lot of these tones would basically be so similar on the card that it wouldn't be distinguishable very much. And so I would raise the value of some of that. He is already distinctly darker than the background. We don't actually need to add very much more darkness to it. So I popped that up. And then also using the exposure to get some of those pages brighter so that they stand out distinctly against that background. And so you have some of that backlit paper that's really bright. Does that feel too bright to you? Or do you kind of like that?
No, I think it does work better lightening up the pages. It does read more as pages, whereas before they could just pass as books, just for this, just because you don't get to see much sort of lighting. I was gonna say subsurface scattering, but I don't know if that applies to paper too. Um, but yeah, with the change you've done, they do read much more as sort of flying bits of paper than before.
Yeah, the same sort of thing that if the objects are very similar in color or similar in value, on the printing, they become very hard to distinguish. And that's what we're running into on some of this, where the books are almost the same value as the background, even though they're a different color. And again, that's going to make them hard to distinguish. So I want to try to push that a little more with the value, so really letting some of them be lit. The next thing I would do, and this is more of a personal thing, you can get away with it without, and you can find a different solution. I look over here and I feel like this is all kind of getting dull over here around her in those books. And it just isn't quite having the pop in a lot of this area that I think it could. And the values, again, we're having like a medium on medium pair of values. There's a lot of medium on medium pairs, which keep things from being very interesting and it kind of blurs together. In that case, I think, can I introduce another light source to bring in some color or value to separate things? And I would probably put in, like, there's a fireplace and give a pop of the warm light. And that's going to help separate out a lot of those edges and the elements in there. Atmosphere. But there, when you pull out, we're going to have plenty of contrast that it's not going to just be getting kind of all the same cool tone. And I do like a lot of the cool tone, but we can have a thing where it's more blue at the top and it gets more of the warm light from the fireplace down further. And I would keep it minimum on him because his silhouette's reading so well. But on some of the elements around on that left and right side, we could get. So that would be something I would consider doing with it. Because I do like that contrast. I like that warm on that cool contrast. And I think it would work well on a card. So that's kind of artistic. Any more thoughts?
I mean, more on what you just did. I really do like that. You were right by saying that that lower left was getting a little sort of lost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I Yeah, I think almost in a way by putting those, because it's like opposite the orange with the blue. I
Yep.
think almost by doing that, you also heighten the idea that the illustrative idea of the blue sort of eating up all the background.
Yeah.
I think it works like it even sort of takes it further, but not so much where you're like, oh, now it's too much contrast. I can't stop looking at these things are bothering me. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is a really nice sort of happy place to
Yeah.
to have.
And this is running off of colors that the artist already introduced. Like the skin
Yeah,
tone has a lot of the warm tones in it. The book is a warm book and he has orange yellow eyes. And so those
right.
colors were already in the palette and we're just using them in a few other places to help pull some distinction against colors. Making
Yeah,
sure that some of this light is hitting these books up here and helping actually tell the forms of those books. So if we turn those off, you can see how those books and the feeling of them being in the air gets kind of lost and they really sink into the background. You can't see them that much. But you throw a light on them, the cool light from that back side, the warm light from this front side, and they get a lot more volume and they pop out a lot.
yeah. They feel like they're part of the scenery much more now. Like they
Mm-hmm.
are in the environment. So, yeah. And it almost, yeah, just also it really, by putting in the bottom left that sort of more warmer tones, it almost in a way also makes the book in the middle be even more noticeable than before. Like before
Yeah.
it was kind of getting lost in a way, even though it was red, it was sort of getting to be part of a silhouette with the front guy. And now it's just sort of it's tying really well, especially with the eyes that the book has.
Mm-hmm.
They're reading much more now, I think. They're calling attention to themselves, which again is part of the prompt, right? It was just the books are
Yeah.
attacking was the prompt. So
Well, it was a good call. The color balance here were the amount of warm with the cyan color was really
mm,
good, and that pairing of that particular grade of warm colors with
yeah,
that cyan was really nice. And so being able to play off of that just keeps it together.
yeah,
Some of the light was added onto the book. You'd have some spill over here, like on the underside of that. Got some added there. some shining off of this, some shining off the teeth. And you could use a little artistic license about what it hits and what it doesn't. Add it a little bit through here.
Yeah.
Uh, I probably wouldn't continue it down a lot. I mean, you could try that and see how it works. You may put some reflecting off of this more shiny stuff over. Pretty neat.
You really have to be careful though, because
This is
sometimes you
yeah.
go too far and you're like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, this one you could easily go overboard and just end up in this really split lighting thing. That's why I think it can work okay on her. Actually, I think it's good on her, but I would
Mm,
keep it pretty toned down on him because he's already
yeah.
balanced quite well.
Especially after you put sort of you lightened up the shadow parts, you're already
Hmm.
pushing him to be read better than, yeah, now than adding something else on top of, yeah, it might be too much.
Well, this is good. Obviously, beautiful work, and I look forward to seeing being able to jump in some challenges going forwards.
Yes, amazing work.
Nicholas is up next. Okay, Nicholas has some comments and says, thanks for the feedback on the concepts last time. I took note of what was pointed out and decided to go back and work on more fleshed out ideas centered around the sense of struggle of the Minotaur and push the chains so they are more prominent in the image, the picture. I included a card mock up above to show how the illustration feels in actual context. Okay, so Nicholas, last time we basically had composition 2 as the chosen image, and dude, you've put in some work.
Yeah, and
This
it
is a
shows.
lot of rendering. Absolutely, it shows. I am particularly digging the head on this guy. The red eye, and when you got the skin tone change around the eye, where it's like that black kind of
Yeah,
skin without the
under the
hair on
fur.
it.
Yes.
Got a good expression going on. So that's in the roughness on the horn. I can feel the roughness, of the hair. So a lot of good stuff going on there, and generally, I think really excellent choices going on here. So hit me with your general thoughts. Anything particular hit you
Yes.
with this?
Well, yeah, I think this is in due order, and it's to say that it shows that you did your change in composition, you took the feedback into account, and I think this is a big improvement from
Mm-hmm.
last time we saw this piece.
Mm-hmm.
But like actually really good improvement. Um, yeah, just the first thing that struck to me, and it's because I'm taking special attention to the idea of the chains and things because of the prompt, is I like the sort of the arcane sort of circle thing where they're coming out of.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the chains, the specific like contact point where they're erupting from, or sort of appearing from. It feels a little bit too disconnected to me at first glance. And I feel like you could also, I mean, you're already what you could use, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. What you could use to sort of marry them a little bit better to this circle that you're making, that are
Couple of
summoning
rings.
these chains. Uh what? Sorry?
Go on.
Oh, would be, well, you're already around the circle, you have these sort of magic flames that are bursting up. You could have some sort of flames coming out of the point of contact to sort of marry them a little bit better. Or I have here, um you could also do, what is it called, I don't know the specific term for it, but it's, for example, when you is it called when you pitch a tent or something like that, you have these things that you bolt to the ground.
Oh, I was thinking about that too, like an anchor
Something, an
point,
anchor, just
like a
something, and I think,
pylon or something else.
mm,
Yeah.
something of the sort, just to sort of marry them to the idea that they're coming from the ground or they're erupting from the circle. Because you already have these sort of debris and things flying around. I think just the point of contact should have
Hmm.
something just so it doesn't feel so disconnected from the circle in the ground.
Yeah, and you could
And
have like some arcane symbols kind of going around the
mhm,
like the stake in the ground, so there's a connection between the two of them,
yeah,
symbols like floating above it or
yeah. I think that could, and by connecting them better to the ground, it could give you even more of the idea that these are some powerful chains and they're not gonna move. And he's not gonna be able to just like yank them up and it's just
something.
it's done dealio. You want the cards to feel powerful in a way. Yeah, my main comment will be that. And also on the horn again, horns are hard to draw in perspective. We've all been there, I think. um I just feel like the horns feel much more sort of flat to me, whereas his face is in three quarters, sort of angling out. The horns feel like they're angling more towards the viewer. If I'm being
Hmm.
descriptive enough on that, I think just tilting. I think it's mostly just the horn in the back that's throwing me off with the perspective. So yeah, like Clint is doing is just you can plot it out with uh sort of geometric shapes and see where draw through to see where that back horn would be. Or oh yeah, Clint showed us earlier. You could go on the Sketchfab, was it called, right?
Hmm.
Sketch. And you could probably find something with similar horns like a what's it called? Buffalo, right? The ones or longhorns.
Yeah, depending on what kind of horn he's looking
Mm.
for, it could be some buffalo, water buffalo, elk, a longhorn. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just the one in the back. It just seems like it's too flat to us, where it should be angling back in a way. Yeah, those were my main comments for now.
Yeah, I like the idea of an anchor point, and of course, Nicholas, you could come up with different ideas. I mean, you could use
Yeah.
some sort of big stake. You could do almost like a giant loop in the ground, right? And it's like anchored around this,
Mm,
almost like a giant lock, right? The end of a lock or something. And maybe it has some rings of magic around it. It could be that way. It could be some sort of other symbol, um, or it could even be like a magic sword, right? And then the
right.
sword is anchored there. But yeah, tying those two together could be really nice. And I'm gonna look at. I was curious about tinting the ground a little more to the blue side. Oh, that's soft light. That's. I was gonna see about getting everything right over and around this to be more blue, just from the atmospherics of and the light from Magic Circle. And that way we can have a little more distinction between some of these foreground kind of silhouetted elements, which I do like, and with him and then upsides, upward angles. Don't catch it as have a little bit of that blue light spill. And otherwise, it feels almost too sharp. Uh, it's almost like a LED light. It's so
Oh,
perfect and sharp, and it's
right.
not really interacting with anything.
Like
And
Tron, would you
yeah,
say? Like the Tron lights in the fly.
but the chains themselves, I'm really liking the iridescent quality of them,
Hmm.
and they're really big. And I feel like these things would be super heavy.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's not gonna. Yeah.
yeah.
Whoever casts that card, watch out for them.
Mm-hmm. So that's feeling really good to me. Let's walk through some other things. I prepped a couple of alterations. First thing is actually the horn. I did go out and look up a horn. Well, I didn't look it up. What I did was one of the things that I would
Oh,
note
I see.
here is we can zoom up and take a look at the head, and we can look at the
Yep.
angle of the head, and we see that the left nostril, to our view, the nostril on the left is the high, and the other one is the low. So it's
Yeah.
angling this way. And same thing with the top of the head. The left side is higher than the right side. However, we've not really seen that the horns are following that same angle. And the horns have to. The horns have to follow that same angle, that the bottom of them are going to be at the same angle low and meet on the top, right? So
Yeah.
I adjusted that so it's going to be something more in that region. It's going to be out to that side. And if it was me, I'd probably put an extra turn on it and reverse the turn at some point so that it's going to get more of a bend in, because it's just more aggressive to have something a bit more like that. I just think it's a better shape to
Mm-hmm.
use. And so we kind of have that alteration with the horns, and you could put the light back up on top. The other thing is, we look at a lot of the Minotaurs from Magic, and this could be something the art director would mention. It's something that I would do without being asked, just because it would be the standard. If they are looking for something different, you wouldn't have to. But generally, the Minotaurs are just uber thick boys. Like, these are massive chest, you know?
Yeah.
They're ridiculously buff. And that's not really what we have here. Like, I mean, if I had this physique, obviously I would look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But we're going beyond that, right?
Yeah.
And
It's fantasy.
so we need to buff him up. And so that's what I did. I just made a copy of the chest, and I did a liquefy and expanded it out so that we added an extra 20 inches to his chest. Boom.
Yeah.
Um,
It was almost is like that like comic book superhero type of chest that's
yeah.
like thing up. Yeah.
Yeah, because these guys are almost comically massive.
Yeah.
So I'll do that, and then we've got to beef up the arm in order to match that and match with the shoulders,
Yeah.
because we saw it and we changed it. Yeah, get
Yeah,
to the
otherwise it would be
chopper.
weird.
And then if we do that, then his thighs look like he skipped leg day one too many
Yeah.
days. And so we've got to beef his thighs up in order to match that out. And on characters like this, the big brawny guys, you can play up the hand sizes a lot. And you can make them 50% bigger than they would normally be without any trouble. And so, like this other hand over here, it just, by the time you make his chest so big and his horns so wide and his legs so thick, it just looks like he has little baby hands. So we want to beef his hand up there.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever watched
Hulk it
that
up.
uh Wreck-It Ralph, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
his hands are like 2 feet long, man.
Yeah.
They're massive.
Like bricks. Like actual.
Yeah, and same sort of thing on this side. Just a little different, kind of thickening it more than making it just bigger.
Yeah. Beef it
But
up.
I'll turn that on and off, and you can kind of see those changes where this changes his physicality up. It makes him feel a lot more powerful. Otherwise, it feels like his head is almost a little too big for his body.
Yeah.
Almost a little unproportional.
Yeah. When it's something so muscular, you almost want to give it like that Hulk effect where the head seems smaller proportionally, but it
Mm-hmm.
still fits because it's just the muscle parts are the ones that are getting bigger, not the head in a way. Um, not the skull or anything like that. It's just the muscles beefed up.
Could even see about actually dropping that head down a little bit more onto the shoulders to make it feel like he's extra thick, where his neck
These
is
traps,
being
yeah.
completely covered.
The traps are out of control, you
Mm-hmm.
guys. Yeah.
He chews with his traps. Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah, and this is a really good observation from Nelly in the chat. Is by bulking him up, it makes the chains look even more strong. Because
Yeah.
if this strong guy is getting chained down, you know this spell is powerful.
So if you do that, you need to make a little alteration to like the straps and the metal circle there on the chest, because you're warping it, and it'll have a slightly different angle. Um,
Good liquefied.
the other things, I think it's just some small stuff. Otherwise, I think it's really, really successful. Uh, the shoulder plate is perhaps a little too basic. It literally has no markings, no kind of detail, no
Mm,
culture, no anything to it.
yeah.
So just go out and look at some armor, or even look at some fantasy armor, and see if we can't add something to it. A secondary curve to it. Some, if you want to look like at orc armor, that's usually more rough. Maybe it just has an extra spike, or maybe it has some bolts, in it, or they patched it from a couple of different pieces. Something to give it a little more character, a little more interest. And same thing like on these. I like the strap comes down to the metal ring uh, that all the stuff is tied to. But and I also do want to know, hey guys, if you do this, don't put the metal ring right in the middle of the chest.
Oh, that's
Nicholas has done
powerful.
the
Yeah.
right thing. Nicholas did the right thing in that it was actually off his center of chest, right?
Yeah.
But what you can do is have like, if this is looping around, then where does the other end of the leather go? Well, it actually loops back on itself and it attaches to itself. That's the way it works. But these also should be cinch points, points that can be adjusted. That's how you take it on and take it off. And so what you could probably do is just to add a bit more authenticity, I guess. You're going to have a little band right here where it's going to loop over like that. And then it actually runs through the back and around the front. And then it comes back up through that loop like it does on your belt. And so it's double thick right there where the back part goes around the back side of the ring. And then it comes up through this side. And there could be even like you could make this like a belt thing right there. So it's actually adjustable. And then you would need to have holes where he can pull it. He loops it around the ring and then he pulls it up and he latches it as tight as he needs it. And this is definitely a sort of place where we could have like a ridge on the outside of the leather strap. And you've got a little thickness where the leather is kind of on the inside. And you have a little more character to the furnishing there on the character. So those are some small things, just adding in the same sort of love and variance that we have in that face. We want to add that across some of the equipment as well. Okay, that was my main thoughts. Otherwise, I'm quite pleased with it. And I think it reads really well on a card.
Yeah, especially in the little mock-up on the side. That's there even before the changes and
Mm-hmm.
the ideas, and it already sort of reads, and you can see that everything is kind of desaturated, but the chains, and it's
Yeah.
really giving the chains some sort of attention. So
Mm-hmm.
really good work on that. Again, comparing it to your first concept from last time, this is like heaps better in terms of
Oh yeah.
working for a card, like heaps and heaps better. So
Yeah,
good job.
whatever process you went through to bring it to this is working really well for you.
Yeah,
Whatever the time that you put in, well spent, and I think you're going to have a really lovely piece.
yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, now we're going to be taking a look at Olivia. Actually, use the little crop of the head as the thumbnail for this one.
Yeah.
I reversed it though, so the text can be on the other side.
It's like the Minotaur is shouting, "Come to the Swatches stream. You need to."
Okay, my pad. Oh, of course, just randomly my pad decides it's not
No,
going to work right now.
no pen
Unplug it.
pressure.
Well, it's not
Oh,
moving. Let me move it
oh,
around.
yeah. Something might have disconnected itself in the cable, perhaps.
Hmm.
Oh, Nicholas says, I'll probably rework it a bit alongside pushing the proportions. Yes, I wouldn't say you need to do big changes to your piece, Nicholas. Just a couple things we mentioned.
Can I move it if it's not in Photoshop?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, sometimes Photoshop likes to mess with
Yeah,
us.
okay. So I have to move it over a different window, then it like re-registers
Mm.
where the mouse is, and then I can bring it back. Okay. So, Olivia, this is another really excellent submission. Got a
Yeah.
lot of work done here. There's an excellent level of polish. I'm particularly loving the rendering of a lot of that matted hair.
Yeah.
And also, this is another great rendition of the sort of astral chains, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
those are getting a great read to them. Any major things that you're loving or are not loving on this image, Nito?
Yes. And it's actually one thing, but I have pros and cons to it.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia, and don't get angry with me, Olivia. So I'll start with a compliment. Compliment sandwich, if you will. Um I really like it's really creative what you're doing with the hand. You're giving these like spectral hands, and they're sort of are the ones that are tying up and are sort of handling the chains and whatnot. On that, my thing would just be I like how you're posing them, especially the one in the middle that's reaching out, sort of it's guiding the chain forward. But it's just to me, the hand poses, they seem almost a little too delicate. I feel like these hands, if they're sort of yanking at the chains and whatnot, especially the one on the right side, if there's any way, I don't know if it's possible or not, if there's any way to pose the hands in a way where you can see them sort of pulling with more force, or you see, I guess would be flexing more, or is
Mm-hmm.
it flexing, or yeah, just sort of having these hands have, again, I think this goes back to the Kong thing, is the purpose. It's like showing that there's purpose behind it. I think, yeah, just the hands being them like grabbing with more force, the chains could also work. um and my second thing on the chains uh is more on like the shape language of the chains, and it's that they're round all around, and that can work beautifully, but it can also read not as aggressive as it could or should when you have a lot of these curves to them. um I would just say I like what you're doing with the chains. I like the thickness. I like they feel strong. It's just there you might benefit from having a little bit more of angled shape language to it, sort of. Yeah, I don't, hopefully it's what I'm trying to say, it's coming across.
Making the design of the chain links themselves more
Yeah,
rectangular
it
rather than curvy.
I mean, they are rectangular and they're curving, but to me my first impression for some reason, and I think it's because of the shapes and how they're sort of really curving and curving everywhere, or it might be the rendering, they can feel a little bit like what is this called, bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It reminds me like they could be kind of made out of bubbles, or sort of like pool floaties in a way. I think it's that has to do mostly with the little highlights that you're putting around, especially the one in the middle. It has I hate that I can't point at it in the stream. Um, but the way they're rendered, sort of in the middle of the forms, you have these little highlights. And I think uh that's what's making it read a little bit more like a bubble or like a
Mm.
floaty to
Mm-hmm.
me. I think if you just got rid of those little highlights, it might just solve the problem. And read more of like just the magic sort of translucent
Yeah.
glowy effect. But yeah, that was my main thing, is just on the chains and having, and I know Olivia, you had a big thing with the chains and the struggle, but yeah, I just think addressing them a little bit more could benefit the piece.
Yeah, with the hands, the general idea of the hand I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it might be one of those where we need to exaggerate the hand pose in order to get it
Mm.
to read properly. And you may even want to give them a bit more of the translucency that we have with the chains, so that they exist better together. What I'm
Mm.
trying to do is like this was I'm just kind of sketching, like making the hands a bit more angular so that
Yeah.
we can get everything's either like a concave or convex curve,
Yeah.
and we want to stretch them out a little more. I'm trying to like make it a little longer so that it feels like getting more of that kind of curve out of it. You're making them a little more bony so that we can get better transitions between some of the curves. And that's how I would approach it if I wanted to try to get some more out of them. I'm also thinking that they should always be on the end of a chain.
Mm.
I'm like, it makes sense to me, this middle one with the hand, that it's the thing reaching out. But like this one on the right, I feel like that ought to be on the end of another chain. And so otherwise it's like he's not pulling against anything. He has no anchor, right? To pull with.
Mm.
So it's just a hand moving, but I don't feel like it has any tension to work with. And but if he was the end of this chain and he's pulling on it, that would make a little more sense to me. And that's how I would think about it. And that's how um some of these links, I think something that may work a little better is thinking in terms of basically you want the pattern where you see one link that is more flat, and then the other link has to be sideways in order to fit into that link. And so you have
Mm.
like a flat link, and then you see another side link, and then it's flat, to your view link. And this sort of silhouette is really, really easy to see, and it immediately evokes chain. But yours are done in a way where they're almost all exactly the same along the edges. So you don't really have that in out chain thing going on. Because like this link here, it's curving that direction on the top, but curving the opposite direction on the bottom. Where it's not really need to be doing either. It really needs to be going vertically to our view. In which case we would get more of this. Right? And we would actually see this one here, and then we'd see the back side of that one on the other side.
It breaks up the silhouette much better, I think.
Yeah, the silhouette of the chain will read much better if you allow it to do the thick, thin, um, what a pattern, visual pattern. I just wanted to do 3 here for you to proper understand what. But I do like using I'm okay with the slightly rounded ones, and I think the rounded shape will work better if you do have that thick, thin pattern.
Yeah.
And the middle connection between them is really nice because it makes them feel extra sturdy, which I think that's good. Um, yeah, that head is really rocking for me. That feels
Yeah.
excellent. And the overall pose is going well. You repose that back leg. I think that's working because we're working with some pretty strong for shortening. So that works out.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
mostly
Okay.
this one, the chains. It was
I
mostly
do
just that.
think some work needs to be put into the background. Some of this stuff back here with these rocks are just kind of messy. We can clean them up. They don't necessarily need to be detailed, but that does need to be cleaned up a little bit. I think some detail could be added to the top of this rock he's standing on. A lot of that is really basic. So adding some more cracks, some smaller pebbles, some layering of dust, that sort of thing, then that would be fun. And that would help just add to the visual. I would think about maybe adding a bit more light in order to separate this. I'm always going to be looking for areas where things are going to get lost or things are getting too similar. Like all of this area around his rear, that back foot, the underside of the thigh, very similar tones that are going to get lost on a card printing. So I would think about, is there some other slightly warm light that we could add that might be catching the underside, and not a lot, just a little bit, just to kind of separate out some of those elements and create a distinction there. Can we do that? Or even going back to what you had earlier, which all of this is sort of just an illustrative option because sometimes what really would actually look lost. But going back to the okay, well maybe the ground is just lighter there. It doesn't have a really distinct cast shadow because it's such indirect light. And so even if we did that and just made the ground a bit more that way, say the cast shadow is being casted further back, then that stands out, I think, a little nicer. Separates some of those shapes out. Small thing. Small. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is feeling kind of muddy here, and you've got to figure out how this is being handled. Do the chains actually have a thickness to them? Because we have the inside of these chains over here getting dark, but we don't have the chains getting dark anywhere else. So if we want them to be dark, we need the background to be dark behind them so that dark can show up or show through them. Otherwise, the inside of those chains needs to stay light because it is light. There's nothing there to darken. And so all those need to be tinting lighter. So one or the other, either we put something dark behind there for that to show up against, or we need to just let them remain as light. Any more thoughts here?
No, I mean, I do agree with what you said before about the chain silhouette. I think that solves a problem that I was talking about very nicely about sort of maybe the shape language and whatnot. But you're right, you could keep those chains just what is it called? Like alternate one and one and one to sort of
Mm-hmm.
the angle change. I think that would really sell that foreground on the left, that chain sort of going from the foreground. I think that would really help that one read by
Yeah.
doing that interlocking idea. Um yeah, I think I see you on the stream doing that right now. I was gonna mention just would these chains have strong enough light for them to sort of show as as much on sort of the leathers and the hairs and things, like they're to cast their blue light on it.
That's a
So
good question, and it brings up a good point. And that is, would they? Probably yes. Would I show it?
mm,
Probably no.
yeah,
Because the more that I add it around the scene, the more its intensity sort of gets diluted.
yeah,
And I need them to show up very clearly on just the 1 second read. And
yeah,
so I don't want a lot of green bouncing around on all the stuff around it. Which in a lot of cases I would say that, oh, we need to make sure the light's consistent and it's affecting everything.
mm,
But I need the chains to be really clear from a very small read. And
yeah,
so I would artistically just decide that they're not really affecting things very much. I'd show maybe a little bit on a few objects, particularly more shiny things like the leather. And then that'd be kind of about it.
mm, yeah. No, that makes total sense. And last super fast thing would be on the account of the values of these chains, right? To show that they're transparent, you need the lightest value to go on the edges, right? Because it's curving out the form. Um,
Yeah, it helps them give that astral sort of
yeah,
look.
I was gonna say, would you, for them to read better, especially the ones near the foreground, would you lighten that edge a little bit more? I think that could also help sort of them read. Like so their glow is more intense in the foreground as they go back, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
that actually
Just
brings up a good point. Is like you can have it so that wherever they're anchored, they're brighter, and then it gets
right, yeah.
slightly darker as it goes, or dimmer as it goes further out, and then maybe
Yeah.
it reaches the hand on the end, and it gets really bright at the hand. Uh, and then everything in the middle is weaker and weaker until it reaches either end.
Yeah.
And so,
Um
yeah, you could have the ones here in the foreground have a lot more punch to them, and then get less, as it's sort of going out.
yeah, I think that could help them, especially the foreground ones, that could help them read a little bit more sort of in card size. Because
Hmm.
they might be getting to me, like when I zoom out of this piece without these changes, I feel like the chains, the closest they are to me, the less I see them, which is okay. You want them not to be in focus so much because the focus is further down the perspective, but you'd still want them to show up. It's tricky business.
Yeah. And it's always going to be a balancing act like
Yeah,
that between what looks realistic, what can I get away with, and just what reads well for the
yeah.
player. And ultimately that has to win uh, the competition of what do I do. Okay, plenty more to look at. Let's put that one down. Next up is Tim Thomas.
Wonderful.
Okay, Tim has comments. Says still wasn't happy with my concept, so I decided to do some more thumbnails. Landed on this one that I'm fairly happy with. My current concern is that I might have gone too far in the opposite direction. If you missed the first concept he did, it's this one on the upper left there. And my feedback was that we're almost too zoomed in. And I had recommended, well, you might just go with completely enveloping him, so basically his
Yeah.
head's just out. And so he's gone the other direction where we've got way more chain and the guy's smaller. I made the Minotaur too unimportant in this scene. Despite not
Yeah.
hitting the prompt spot, I've been having fun with the comp. Well, glad you're having fun. We do have to note, since this is a stand-in for like a commercial project, that this is definitely the sort of thing that you would send an update to your art director about before you
Mm,
put much time into it. They really need to sign off on this big of a direction change before you do any kind of real painting time. And that's just a heads up. Hey, if you're working, make sure you do that. Otherwise, might go, oh man, you've missed it. I didn't know that you were doing this. You know.
Yeah, it's just it catches them last minute in the deadline. You
Mm-hmm.
just put it in last day, and they're like, okay, it might you might pull it off, right? And they might be like, oh, this is great, but you're really gambling on it. I think
Yeah.
it's a huge risk to do that. I would say.
And yeah, Tim, I think it's good to play with more concepts. I also think that you're right. The Minotaur is too unimportant. And if I saw this at card size, and I'm zooming it down to where it's somewhere near that on my computer screen, at my 1 second glance, I don't even know he's there.
Yeah,
A 1 second glance, it tells me this is a chain tornado.
yeah, that's what I noted too. It's just a
Yeah,
chain tornado
and
card, and it could be,
100%.
but it could work for the chain tornado card.
Yeah.
That's what they're asking you to do.
But as far as what this challenge is about, the gist of what it's about is in there. But again, uh, you're flip flopping between having the right balance. Where this is 100% about the, well, it's like 90% about the chain,
Yeah.
10% about the Minotaur, and the other one was like too much about the Minotaur and not really conveying enough about the scene and what's going on in the chains. So what's your thought? How would you go about trying to find a better balance using
Hmm.
this direction?
Yeah, I was in my notes. What I have is, well, if you want to stick to this and you're like, okay, this is the direction I'm going to go, Thomas, um, I would just something to you could consider trying is, um, you could sort of select the area around your character and sort of where the main action is happening, which is the character being enveloped by the chain tornado, if you will. Um, and I would grab that and sort of how I wrote it here is you would almost like cut one third of the chain tornado out.
Mm-hmm.
So make it one third smaller, not smaller on the page, but like again, I wish I could just point at it like I'm pointing, but just grabbing the last third at the top and just making it larger and replacing it. There, you did it. It just showed in the screen. Yes, it's just moving that down, just cutting one third of it, the middle third, just cutting it off. And then you'd really sort of you'd do sort of a best of both worlds scenario, whereas it is what you had. It is still much a tornado. You still have the same perspective and things and the debris, but it's just right to the point, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, winding up around sort of you need to traverse this whole sort of S curve to get to the action.
Yeah.
The S curve is the action here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is this is actually what I have. You did it in like a second. I didn't even see you do it. Um, but yes, that is just main thing I would say if you really want to keep with this with what you have to work with. Um, Yeah, I would go with that. And then at the same time is uh how can I say this in English? Sorry. Um I really like what you're doing again, the debris, how it's going up. I like that you have small pieces, medium pieces, bigger pieces. I would just have the debris almost be a part, not just delegated to one corner, but
Mm.
be a part of the action with it. So perhaps have a little bit more of the small pieces and the smaller ones sort of go up a little bit more, sort of be part of the screen,
Yeah,
not
it's
just on
all
one.
being thrown around
Yeah, it's
within
just
the.
chaos
Yeah.
everywhere. Like if that chain has had the time to wriggle up and do all of those movements, it's moved a lot of environment with it to
Mm-hmm.
get to this point. It's not like they're just erupting from the ground. And I think that could help you show that and sort of the sheer chaos of, again, a tornado. Think of a tornado in real life. this one's made out of chains. Okay, that's a fantasy difference, but a tornado really brings everything with it. Um, and last but not least would be in the original sketch that you have, without these cropping things and edits, you had, and it took me a while to notice it, he's got one axe on one hand, and then the other, which I like this, the other axe and the other hand has been dropped to the floor. I think you could still get away with that. Just instead of having the axe already on the floor, you could have it flying out of his hand and the
Mm-hmm.
lower left. You could have it like, yeah, he's opened up his hand, he's just whatever, oh, I'm struggling. And his my beautiful acting, voice acting. And then
Oh,
yeah,
my axe, I have
it's
dropped
just
it.
like, yeah.
Ah.
It's almost like I'm doing the stock photo version of it, but like not too forced, but have it still be part of the composition by it being sort of, it's flying out. It also could serve sort of again the chaos of what's happening here. Yeah, those were my comments.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I think getting rid of basically some of that middle section. I like the rocks being thrown around there in the foreground. Definitely want to keep some of those.
Yeah.
But really getting in so we can see how this is affecting the character. And I'm assuming that, Tim, you're going to be developing all of the whirlwind parts. This is all chain. I'm assuming this is just all chain and you haven't gone in and drawn them. But these should all be chain links in here. Otherwise, it's a weird actual like Avatar air tornado
Right.
combined with chains sort of things. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna just assume that this is all chains. We had a
Placeholder.
yeah. Well, he's finding the rhythm of it. He's finding the
Yeah.
shape of it, and I think that's something that's actually working really well. It's a really great collection of curves to get that feeling of motion, and that's working well. There was a comment about oh
The value of his head being too close to the background.
there we go. Well, the value of the entire character is like really
Mm.
close in value and color to the background. And so, I want to draw the attention to some of your references over here, particularly this bottom one of that Minotaur, and some of the other images we saw, which was really controlling the colors and the values so that he overall is several values darker than the background. And all the stuff in the background is more muted. It's not as saturated, it's not as light, and it is not as dark. It is muted in every regard. And that's why the bright chain shows up and the dark shadows show up. And the vibrancy of the chain shows up. So when you do the same sort of thing, right now you're jumping everything to straight white in order to make it glow because everything else in the scene is too bright. But if we can drop the values and drop the vibrancy of the other elements in the scene, it gives you a bigger range to use more color in the chains rather than just having to use straight white. And I would be looking for that same sort of thing. I was playing around with that a little bit of just like toning the sky down so it's more maybe it's more grayish, maybe it's more like that with kind of dusk tones, in which case it can be good because it's kind of a warm cool dynamic going on. And then maybe there's an edge light that's catching part of him, making him pop out. And then overall, a lot of his values could get a lot darker, so that again he reads several values darker than the background stuff. Push those. And overall, that's going to give you a more interesting color. It's going to give you more color. It's not going to just be this white blur. Uh, Because if you're using a lot of white that way, that is one of the reasons it makes it look more like a tornado. It's generally how you would illustrate wind.
Yeah.
And we want it to read more like chain, or at least magical chain, which means we probably want to back away from the white and use more color. Well, that's my input. Looking forward to seeing what you do with it.
Yes.
Good.
Update us. It's always nice to see.
Oh, hang on. Did Hobbit send me the comment? Let me open my Discord
Maybe,
real
yeah.
quick and
Maybe
see.
it is on the Discord.
Hey, don't we still need to look at one?
Yes. We have not forgotten about you, Hobbit.
Originally.
Yeah, she says in Discord she has sent to you. I assume it is in a DM.
Yeah, I got it.
Nice. This is gonna be an actual surprise because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, neither of us have.
It's a
Okay.
mystery. Hobbit mystery.
Anna Maria.
Yes.
Got a lot to sit. I guess you're the stand-in for Anna, so Clinton Anna. I have a bunch of great excuses why I'm so far behind. Oh, I was so afraid that you didn't have a good one, but I'm glad you have some good ones. Out here, but here we are. Indeed. We've been mostly working grayscale, and the colors are pretty much just a direction I'd like to go eventually. Okay, well, I sort of like the toned down, muted colors. Let's look to it. If you have any ideas, all ears. Yeah, not a lot of changes since last time, so not a lot of new. Okay, but I think it is developing well. For as far as we developed, we just had the black and white version last time.
I believe so, yeah. I mean, there were a
Yeah.
couple more the little thumbnails for color, but that was about it, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And there wasn't any design for any garb. You gave him a simple sort of like barbarian leather loin thing. Okay. I have a feeling this is another one where we can say, can we like triple the size of the chains?
Mm.
You know, make them a lot thicker, a lot more robust. Make them feel really heavy. And you can even look at how some of the other guys did their chains and gave that sort of translucency, because this is one where we're losing the color from the chains. And I have found with Magic, like if they say that a certain thing is a magical color, it needs to be that magical color.
Right, yeah.
Because in Magic, in whatever game you're working with, those are usually very consistent. That's one of the things the art director looks for, is that there was one time I was asked to do a card. Oh yeah, it came out. Name of it, Light the Way or something. Theros Beyond Death, and there was a guiding light made across the train to show the way out, and I made it gold because it looked really. The gold looked really good against kind of the bluish
Yeah.
tones in the scene, and the art director said, "Okay, that looks great, but only white cards can use gold because
Oh,
that's the color that's equated to white spells.
right.
So this has to be something, and I think it was a blue card, so it has to be within like a cyan blue
Mm.
range." And so I had to adjust the scene so that everything shifted, I think, more violet in order for the cyan blue to show up more. So yeah, you gotta think about those things and how to make those colors read right and properties. So for this one,
Wait, sorry, I think you cut out, Clint.
can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yep. Okay. It might have had a glitch.
Oh, maybe. Maybe it was just on my end though. You cut out that last part you were saying. You said so anyways, and then
Oh, so anyways, just moving on. But you have to you have to think about those colors, and you
yeah,
usually do have to stick pretty close to those. And
yeah.
there's a reason that those colors are chosen, and yeah, it usually is a priority where sometimes you don't think it
Mm.
should be, but it actually is.
Yeah, it's the iconic colors of the different magic. Like magic in itself is about the five, is it five different colors?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd imagine they're really important. Again, going back to what you said earlier today in the stream is the readability of seeing what type of card it is, not only from the action but also again now the color um is quite important for something that's like a game and that has mechanics and things built into it. Um yeah, just if if I could just quickly say, you have really good reference. I'm seeing Hobbit on the side.
Mm-hmm.
There's like some breakdowns of the minotaurs and their different bodies and muscles and things. That's amazing. I need to know where you found that because that looks like really good reference. The 3D model with the different color coded muscle groups. It shows like really nicely the exaggeration, how they're being bulked up. Oh, I like that with the moon also, or the I guess it would be the sun here in the back.
Yeah, I was just playing with that, see if we can get any cool interaction
Yeah,
using the reference image to kind of throw in some different shapes, some like broken towery shapes or pinnacle shapes, and also throw in some extra color.
yeah,
I'm okay with it being somewhat muted, but we don't want to go too far. We do want some color in it. And that one had a lot of color. So you can play around with this and you can see that this could actually work quite well. Something
yeah.
in almost any of these veins would actually be really.
You could it just struck me because you were flipping through the colors. Like if you go for like an orange kind of sky, it could be almost like you're doing like the opposite, the flip opposite of what Nelly was doing with the blue. So then by having like the orange background and then the blue chains, it's a really nice sort of way to contrast them
Mm-hmm.
and bring even like make the blue of the chain even more noticeable.
Yeah, I'm gonna use a hard light layer and see if we can't throw some of that blue in there and see how that color contrasts.
Yeah. Again, even without changing, I mean, I think you still should Hobbit think about changing the size of the chains even without changing that, just by putting
Yeah.
the blue on it, it's making it show sort of much more um in contrast to the other colors. Also, don't worry about linking me just right now, Hobbit. We can talk about it later.
If it was me, I would also be looking at allowing most of this foreground area to have a bluish tint to pull it away
Mm,
from the colors of that background, particularly on the top of this rock, and letting that do this. And then you could use, if you do have, I mean, I kind of like the idea of having some sun or something actually behind him now that I threw it up there. I
yeah.
feel like that works pretty well. And that allows you to use more reflection in the water in that background here. Get a real nice pop of light uh, overhead part. And that seems really pleasant to me. And I think that's a nice dynamic that's going on. kind of got this blue underlight hitting most of him. How's that feeling to you?
I like it. Again, yeah, just it might be a little biased because my favorite contrast is like orange with blue. um, but no, I really like it. And again, it brings out what I mentioned earlier, even once again, sort of the illustrative, more illustration aspect
Mm-hmm.
out of it, more like you're taking these specific decisions as an artist to make something be more colorful than it otherwise could be,
Yeah.
and it helps with the idea of, oh, this mythical minotaur creature is kind of part of the world. I like the direction you're overpainting it with. Would you say that sort of putting sort of the blue in the ground as well uh makes you, how can I say this, like lose a little bit of the legs on the silhouette?
Uh, yeah, I would probably erase the legs out a little bit so that
Mm,
they kind of shadowed on the front
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and it's
I was
mainly
gonna
just.
say, just even from the start, the legs, the bottom legs, even without the changes, they felt to me a little like they were just sort of melting into the ground because they were
Mm-hmm.
almost exactly the same value, which sometimes you do want though for the character to be part of the sort of the foreground silhouette, but I would have just like changed it ever so, just so it could be extra readable. um yeah, I like this direction, and it seems like Hobbit also like it. It says it looks a lot better, to be honest. It kind of goes more back to the value study number one that she says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that.
You can let some of that cooler go in. Um, yeah, do spend some time thinking about the chains though, and what kind of chain links you want, what the nature of the makeup is, because we've seen several kinds, and we've seen the ones that are more rounded on the sides and the ends that have the support piece in the middle and link up that way. We've seen more that have been kind of classical, but they have the spikes on either side. That's kind of cool too. You do something like maybe they're more like diamond shapes. Think of this, those before too.
Oh, didn't they do those a lot in was it the guilds of Ravnica, was it? The one guild that's like very like demonic and stuff, and
Oh, they
I
probably
don't
did.
remember
I
the
forget
name.
which
But yeah,
one it is. But yeah,
I do
find
know
something
the
like that
exact.
and make sure that they're probably 3 times the size of these links.
Mm,
Especially here in the foreground, you're going to be looking at for shortening, maybe more like that. I would tendency to push it pretty far as I can reasonably do, and have it acceptable.
yeah,
Get
I
it?
mean, but uh, I see how, but you're using kind of like the, what is it called, like the chain brush. I would just say as a placeholder, it's good, right? So just use the same brush but make it bigger, and you do that as a placeholder, and then you can go in and sort of change the design and render it out, I think. What do you
Yeah.
think about that process?
No, I would literally do it the same way. I would
Yeah.
find me a chain brush and scale it up to the size that you want, and you can make them so that they change size uh, based on pin pressure.
Pin pressure, right? Yeah.
And so you could press harder and make them really big and lighten it up as it goes away. Or you could do like a stretch skew sort of thing to
Hmm.
that out. Then I would lower the opacity of that and then go in and draw all the links with whatever the particular design that I wanted. And then I might turn them so that they look like they're actually wrapping around the body correctly.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what a chain brush isn't going to do. It doesn't understand that it needs to foreshorten as it, curves around something. But yeah, this is good as placeholder. I think it's good to throw something in, see if the dynamics of their angles are working well. Is it giving the right read? And then you start going in and really putting some more time in. I do like the way that's kind of crisscrossed across his body. That feels good. Yep. This is another one where you may have... Actually, I think it needs it. I think you do need some, like, the dirt exploding up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it almost feels more like he's just chained in place and not like this just happened. More like he's a prisoner and he's just bound here. Not like he's trying to go somewhere and it's just stopped him. And that makes me think about his pose. Maybe if... Yeah. I think, why does it feel that way? Because his feet are completely sideways and not like he's trying to move in a direction. So if one foot was actually in front of the other one, or he's trying to drive forwards, then that would make it feel more like he's trying to go somewhere. And this, it just feels like he's standing there just pulling on them. And more like he's just fighting against the fact that he's chained up, rather than that he's trying to escape by having a lot of forward, motion. Yeah, that's what I've got offhand. The rest of it, it just needs to be developed more and possibly adding in some more elements to him. You can even think about things like war paint, across the character. And sometimes on these sort of characters, you can look at having tufts of hair coming off of like the shoulders and the forearms, just to break up the really human skin everywhere. And that he has certain areas of their body have more hair on them, show more of the bovine traits. Okay, we'll finish it up on that one. And we'll look at Tolner. Tolner says, "How are you? So this is what I have so far. Didn't want to fully finish it. Because, Susie, I feel like it's still missing a lot. I'd like to know, what would be your top 5 tips in terms of proving productivity?"
Have you considered becoming a professional voice actor, Clint?
I have.
A backup
I think
career.
it would be fun.
Yes. That was very enjoyable.
Where does that come from? That comes from me sitting around all day working and playing with different voices.
Yeah. It's the best.
Yeah. You feel like you're about to get shanked.
Tyler. Oh no, Tyler.
It's that voice you don't want to hear after the creak while you're laying in bed at night. Okay. So let's hit that first. The question. A couple of tips on productivity. I did write down a couple of tips beforehand, and these are in no particular order, and I didn't give a lot of time thinking about them, but there were some major ones that came to mind. So let's go over them. Number 1 is workflow. And we actually talked about that earlier on Nelly.
Nelly? Yeah.
Nelly. uh, that you can see from their image that they have a really good workflow. They know how to work on the composition and get what they need to out of the composition before they move on. Then they know what they need to establish from the values, and they know what they need to establish from the colors. They know that after this stage, the next stage is they need to get a lot of references, and they know what kind of references they need in order to, get the answers and the quality that they want. Having that workflow is really important because it takes out as much of the trial and error as possible. It's kind of like having a recipe where you know that if you at least follow these main guidelines, you're going to get something pretty good. And you're not just making it up every time, as you're going along. If you want advice on workflow and what the workflow might look like, a couple of months ago, I put out the understanding illustration process, and it's 3.5 hours long, walks you through the entire workflow, answers all of this sort of stuff. You read the brief. What do you do after you immediately read the brief? What information are you looking for? What notes should you be taking? Okay, now you're moving the thumbnail process. What are you accomplishing in the thumbnail process? What are you not accomplishing? Here's a demo of doing some thumbnails. Here's thumbnails that I've done. I take you all the way through it. This is a little plug for it because I don't have the time to give you all that information. But I've spent lots of hours, hundreds of hours, putting together this product.
Right.
And you can find it on swatchesart.com to address workflow and what that looks like and taking a piece from start to finish. And it's very similar to what I use on my own pieces almost every time. Number 2 is references. You will save yourself time if you have good references. And you will waste a lot of time trying to just guess at stuff if you don't. Yeah. This also it goes in, the more that you do it, the more you learn what references you actually need, what you don't. You can go overboard and say, well, I just found my 332nd reference for this project. I think I'm finally ready. Like, dude, no, you don't need that many.
Yeah.
I worked with a guy some time ago. Like, here's my reference folder, and I'm just going, you've got to be kidding me. At some point, it just becomes oversaturation, and your brain can't do anything with it. So it would be better to have just a handful of really good applicable references than dozens and dozens of inspiration images that don't actually give you any answers as to the way things need to look on your image. Number 3 is focused time. Are you setting aside time to really work? Are you also trying to watch a movie at the same time? Are you trying to make dinner at the same time and you're jumping back and forth? Are you only having 10 or 15 minutes at a time because it's really hard to get in the groove if you don't have a long time to get into the groove? So having focused time really helps. Let's pause there on just those first 3. Anything on those first 3 that you would put a comment on that stands out to you, or anything from your own experience?
No, I do agree with what you're saying. And the workflow, I know you said no particular order, but workflow is, I think, fundamental to
Mm-hmm.
develop. And on the notes of workflow, it's always good to, again, I do recommend what you've done, Clint, because I think that one, that I would call it a course, that little sort of class on workflow. You leave with like, is it that one, or was it the different illustration one where you leave with a sort of a PDF that you can reference back onto sometimes? Or is that the different, there was one that you did that came with like a quick sort of guide that you could go back to.
Oh
Was it
yeah, I do have the other one. It came out last year, I think.
um
What did that? I'm just trying to remember the name of that.
it's in the store. You will find it
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
store.
Check it out
But
on the
yeah,
store.
It's awesome because you can reference it back. Again, just the idea of having a workflow or just putting together sort of your own little PDF image of like your steps and the things that you do. It's just always good because it's
Painting
inevitable that
process. On the
oh,
painting
there you go.
process. Yes.
Yeah. Because it's inevitable at some point, maybe not in every piece, but at some point you're gonna feel stuck on something and you're like, ah, and it's really easy to get in your head and sort of be sort of again overwhelmed by everything and the decisions and having something visual or a video or something to go back to be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, where am I in this timeline of my workflow and why am I not progressing? And it helps you sort of
Mm-hmm.
assess where you're at and what you can do. Something that helps me a lot personally with my projects is something as simple as a to-do list.
Yes.
And when I do to-do, and I think we've talked about this before, Clint, both of us, is that I really like doing to-do lists and the idea that you have your piece and your to-do list could encompass your workflow, but it could also go into like, okay, in this painting session I'm going to sit down, what do I need to do today, what can I accomplish in
Yes.
2 hours?
Mm-hmm.
And you do this little, I do this a lot, I do it in countless little post-it notes, and I just write with a pencil and I say, okay, I'm looking at my piece, and I just take 5 minutes to look at my piece and be like, okay, I need to paint the clothing folds, okay, I need to do wraparounds on the arm or whatever it is that you need right at that stage, or I need to do 3 different value studies or something. And just to have it there visually, your little sort of to-do lists makes it almost more manageable to you. um, and there's just something so satisfying as okay, I needed to paint those clothing folds, you finish the clothing folds and you get to like cross it off. That
Mm-hmm.
helps me a lot personally, just like crossing it off the list and be like, okay, next, next, next. So that could be a really good thing to try out as well for productivity. But yeah, that those are my 2 cents on it. Who is that? Is that Tolner or is that you, Clint?
Oh, I don't know. It's just
In the
people.
Minotaur.
Uh, yes. I like the idea of the to-do list. But something
Yeah,
I'm gonna encourage everybody to actually do is write out your workflow. You want to think
yeah,
about that as some of your homework for the week. Write down what your workflow is so that you are really clear about each step.
yeah,
I'm going to start this step. What do you accomplish on that step? What is that step about? What is the priority thing to get done on that step? Okay, well, when I read the brief, what am I paying attention to?
mm,
What have I learned? What
yeah,
notes do I need to take? Okay, now do we clarify? Do we immediately go right find references, or do we sketch first? What you're making is a checklist,
yeah,
stages, next, 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 and take the time to do it. And that way, it's really clear in your mind, and you're not going to be waffling around. And it doesn't have to be exactly what I do. It doesn't have to be exactly what somebody else does. But it
yeah,
needs to match your style and the way that you like to work. And then you can adjust it over time, but know what it is and try following it.
yeah. It makes it heaps more like manageable
Yeah.
to have put thought into it. It's just it's next level sort of helping you with not with what's it called, like evading that moment of, oh, I'm stuck, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, I can't do art anymore. And that little crisis that happens when you
Mm-hmm.
don't understand what your workflow is.
The next one is priority. This is sort of a time management thing
Mm.
where productivity really goes down if you start throwing your time into non priority
Yeah.
elements of the image.
Yeah.
If the face isn't done and you're spending all your time doing the chain links on the chain mail,
Yeah.
stop it! Stop it!
Yeah.
Go finish the face. The face is more important than the individual chain
Yeah.
links on the chainmail.
Yeah.
Uh, and this is just maturity. It's self control. It's making sure that the more important elements of the scene get more attention faster or sooner than the other less important elements. Uh, and you'll find that some elements of the scene really don't need that much attention if you
Yeah.
just do the important things first.
Yeah.
Then the last one is quality over speed. Just because I see this coming up more often in the consults that I do, and that is that people seem that they're really caught up on productivity because they want to do things faster, and so they think if I just force myself to go faster, I'll be able to.
Mm,
But that's not the
tricky.
answer.
Yeah.
The Again, this kind of priority thing. You have to be able to hit the quality. If you can't hit the quality, it doesn't matter how fast you failed.
Yeah.
You can't fail fast enough to offset the fact that it didn't succeed. But you can go slower and raise the chance that you're going to
Yeah.
succeed. So always make sure that you can hit the quality that you want. And then I guarantee you that the speed will come with it. You will learn to do it faster. I used the analogy just yesterday in the consult of imagine that you're forging a path through the jungle. You're out there with your machete. You're hacking your way. Does it take a while the first time that you go down that path? Absolutely. Oh man, it's tiring. Oh man, it's slow. Oh dang, the bugs and the scrapes.
Yeah.
But the second time that you go down that path, much faster. And the same
It's
thing
already
with
cut for
this.
you.
Yes. So you're already familiar with the process. You're already familiar with what you're doing and the sort of answers that you need. And you're familiar with how to take the right references. And you're familiar how to put your layers together. And you're familiar with all this. And so does it still take a while? Of course it does. All these images take a while. But learning, after you learn how to hit that quality, it's a lot easier to hit that quality again. But it's reaching that level in the first place that's the difficult. Okay, well, we used up all of Tolner's time on that, so we'll just be. Okay, well, okay, we're not going to keep talking about that because you have to. But okay, on this image though, I do like the overall color tones and having the sort of reddish tones and the cyans. You got a little of the cool violets over there on the other side. And overall, I think that's working pretty well. And it's definitely getting a mimic of the same sort of that Asian art style that is more prevalent and that you were trying to get from this image. I'm definitely getting that. Overall, I feel like a lot of it is just really kind of unclear. It's underdeveloped to the point where I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Cause like I don't know where the upper arm is and where the lower arm begins. Like I'm kind of unsure of what any of this is in the dark area. And I'm getting really unclear back here. But I have to stop and think, okay, I guess this is a cloak, but what is that just a shape? Or is that nothing? Right? And so if I have to stop and wonder about it, we just need to develop it more. Something else is the shoulder piece. Having the shoulder piece, okay, yeah, it makes sense as a shoulder piece. But we've put a face, a skull, which is a
Yeah.
really recognizable thing, and it's facing straight at us. And it's this thing of really high contrast of blacks on whites. And it's almost in the middle of the entire scene. So we probably have to get rid of that, or we really need to modify it somehow. Otherwise, it almost grabs attention more than the face does. It's kind of the split between the two of them. I have some other comments, but jump in there. What's some of your observations here, Nita?
Yeah, again, pointing at my notes because first thing I wrote was watch out for the skull. It's competing with the
Mm.
Minotaur head for the first read.
Hmm.
It's competing, and Clint said it beautifully there.
Hey, good observation. I concur.
Yeah. Um, what would I say? Uh, oh yeah, it's mostly on the chains on the background, which are on the top left for us when we look at the image. And they
Hmm.
would be that to me they're reading flat, so they're almost making like a frame for the picture rather than be part of the perspective. I
Yeah.
think what could work wonderfully here is to grab those chains and tilt them back in the perspective so that they look, the best way I could describe it here with my words is think of like an asteroid belt on a planet, how it tilts with it and it goes almost, or like grab a frisbee or a plate and tilt it back in the perspective. Hopefully this is making um just having them wrap around so you could almost like have, I guess they would overlap a little bit with the head of the character, if that makes any sense. Like having them be like a ellipse around, they're still pointing at the character, they're just going back in the perspective, um, to really sort of, especially because of the background on this image, you don't get that much like depth in the image. Having those go back and be moving forwards, to us, sort of instead of pointing down, they're pointing towards them. I hope this is making sense. Um, just like having them overlap with the character, so the character is in between or in the middle of this donut, I guess, of chains would really help you sell a little bit more depth that you otherwise don't have because of the nature of the background.
Okay. In answer to your issue, Tolner, uh, check with Nito, and she will send you a diagram from her screen of what this is that she's talking about.
Yeah, I really, I guess I would really need to like draw it. But
But I do concur with the idea of, can we find a different perspective, way that it's bending so that we're getting more of a three-dimensional quality out of the chains.
yeah.
Yeah, and I assume that you have a mock-up of, or an idea of how that would look. So he can just get a hold of you. He said he would.
Yeah, I'll
Uh,
grab the image. I'll do, it's just like grabbing them and warping them uh, with a transform tool, but I just, my words, I am so eloquent. I can't even describe that. Um,
this is another one where we probably want to beef up the links so that we can really have that. You know, see, these are pretty clear here, but definitely the ones in the background, we need to have that thin, thick pattern to them so that they're reading as chains. It looks like you just kind of blocked some of them in. Um, make sure that you have a good reference because it looks like a lot of this is being kind of guessed at with the face. Because like we have the ear that's down underneath the eye, way down here on the jaw, and this is just telling me that you don't really have a good reference for what's
mm.
going on with the head. I'm unsure if it's bovine or whether it's like more like a ram or something. Uh,
Oh,
so
right.
it feels like it's somewhere in between those. Uh, so again, we need reference. I don't see any references other than inspiration references. And those are good for art style, but they don't actually answer any of the questions as far as your subject. We need a head reference. We need a pose reference. We need chain reference. We need armor piece reference. If you're not using the same sort of head horns, we need a different reference for the horns. We need a weapon reference. We probably need a flowing cloak reference. Right? So these are all things we need to be adding together in order to pull this off successfully. And then we can start playing with it. And I'm going to point you to some of the stuff over here on this artwork. Really look at some of the shapes and how some of the shapes are being used here. It's a really good collection of shapes. And he's like this nice round shape. Then it's offset by these squiggly soft shapes. A sharp shape and a round shape. And that's constantly this this mixture of different kinds of shapes and edges. Really smooth round ones, offset little squiggly ones, squigglies. Then it has sharp, pointy ones, sharp, pointy shapes, soft, round shapes. So he definitely has this shape language going throughout it. And that's something that we want to look at over here on yours. Like, we have this shape coming across here at the mouth. And then maybe we have more pointed shape there with the teeth. And maybe it comes down here and we have the more squiggly shapes from the hair down there. And then what kind of shapes do we have here on, the shoulder piece? Is it one solid piece all the way around with nothing breaking it up? Seems like maybe it could have a curve on the top. Maybe it could have an angle change right there. Maybe it comes over here and it actually goes up a little bit so the arm could be raised. And then perhaps it has, I don't know, maybe it has a serrated edge on the back end just to break that shape up a little bit. And then you have more of the curvy shapes, as the arm's coming out here. Then maybe there's fur, sticks out down here, so you have some squiggly shapes. And notice that about those pieces, and he constantly has this change of really sharp curved shapes, really pointy long shapes, and then smooth curved shapes. We want to do the same thing with his, right? And these horns, can we get some really nice shapes out of the horns so that they have a more interesting pattern to them? And then with the hair, what is the hair doing? In order to tell the texture, maybe it should be more squiggly. Maybe it should be a little longer or a little scruffier. Okay, let me pause there. Oh, no, I did also want to mention, we need a reference for this arm. I don't know how this arm is coming to us. And then it feels like the forearm is really long because I feel like the forearm goes all the way back to there. And then you have this really strong minotaur that's carrying basically just a hatchet. Can we supersize that hatchet? Can we give him a minotaur-sized axe with all kinds of pointy things on it? Oh yeah, you can do one of those doubles, right? Goes through that space. All right, pause there. Any thoughts, Nito?
Yeah, I was gonna say probably about the weapon, just because it wasn't reading very well.
Mm-hmm.
I like all the changes that you're saying, yeah. Um, hmm. Yeah, just and again, yeah, don't forget about the skull part. Just thinking of something. Would you say that you could get away with the skull being there, or would you sort of just do a different design to it?
You could do the skull, but I just started sketching it where the shoulder's being treated as if it's being turned away from us a little
Okay.
bit
Yeah.
more so that the face is in a slightly more turned view.
Mm.
And I think you could have it as long as that skull wasn't directly into camera. and because it's just too recognizable that way.
Yeah.
And we may treat it in the same color as the rest of the metal. It's more like just it's molded into that shape. And that way it also decrease its importance. Because putting it in a different color like the gold over the silver made it just a little more too important. Got that. See about getting him even thicker. Like, they have really thick bodies. Even these guys up here, look at the volume of their body over there. Massive. Same sort of thing for this guy. Like, this is his torso. Or chest, you know, getting down to his. He's going to be something. His body is going to be more like that. And then we may, if we want to see that back arm, we may have it even further back here. And he could have a different weapon in it. He could have it over here. He could have like a sword up this way. Something like that. He could be grabbing this chain too. Right? Helpful if the hand curved the right way. Otherwise, it would look weird. Or maybe he's trying to grab a chain and stop it. So moving forwards, what I would suggest to do is to just get a white layer, put over top of that, lower the opacity, and then just start drawing over it and clarify your drawing so that you have a really good set of shapes and you're really pulling out the anatomy correctly and you're getting. We need a lot more expression out of this. There's lots of images that show good expression out of these sort of creatures. Even some of the other entries had good expression. Both of your reference images show that really good expression. Particularly look for the way that it folds up over the nose and the furred part across the top of the nose there. Bunches up under the eyes along here. Pulls back around there, around the mouth. Maybe getting that mouth even more open. So it's a lot bigger there. Teeth. And we'll be watching those ears. Probably going to move that ear back here somewhere and let that horn start further up on the head there. Not so far from the back. Just go around every element and let's just refine it and really get a nice sense of silhouette and shape and design out of it, and then go back in with the painting. All right, moving over to the last one by Mr. Tyler Vale. A little too. Pull that down. I tried leaving the Minotaur a bit limited as I wanted the chains to be the focus. Good, cop out. No, I get that idea though. If you do play him up too much and have too many shiny things and all that, it can get too complex. Thanks for the feedback. Well, you're welcome. There we go. I guess I'm finished. This, I think, has a really great overall read for a card. And it's a nice tight cropping, so I know exactly what the piece is about. The poses registering really well. The chains show up really well. A lot of it expression out of the face. I think it's a good blend of the kind of the human facial expressions and pose into the Minotaur body. On the whole, I think this is really good. At this point, it's just going to be going into finessing the piece. Doing some minor changes to values, to colors, to the lighting. But on the whole, I don't think any major changes, not like repositioning the character or composing the scene. Did you read any major changes needing to be done here?
Major changes moving stuff around? Not really. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. I would just do. I really like the chains and what you're doing with the chains. You're designing them. They look quite aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I applaud you on that, Tyler. This is maybe nitpicky, but and it might also be my screen. They're reading a little bit too purple for me. Um, yeah, I don't know. The brief, I think it called for either green or blue
Mm-hmm.
chains. It might be my color calibration. They're reading a little too purple.
They are on the purple side, yeah.
Mm. Would you say that could like would they tell you to change that? I mean, it's still technically blue, right? But
Potentially, it would really be up to the art director
yeah.
and whether that's consistent for that entire set.
Okay.
Um,
But yeah,
if
just like
possible, I'd probably swing a little more to the blue side. I just did that. I just made a slightly.
yeah, no need to repaint
But that would be
anything.
one thing that they might ask you for a minor change on, depending
Mm.
on the situation.
Um yeah, that was my one point, and the other is that the what is it called? The knee pad armor
Mm-hmm.
that he has, because he has his I see it in the sketch and I know that that's the knee because in the sketch he doesn't have it, so I can deduce that it's the knee. I don't at a glance at like a smaller size, the first thing is that it read to me as it's part of the belt armor.
Mm.
And it might not read so much as the knee to somebody that doesn't know from the previous sketch that it's supposed to be a knee.
Who doesn't know what a knee is?
I mean,
I
it might
suppose
again
so.
might just be me, but at a small size, it to me it reads like it's part of the belt armor. Yeah, that would be my only notes that I have on this.
Otherwise, it is perfect.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, I could see where that would be an issue, and I think you could probably resolve that by raising the value of that metal a bit, especially along that left side,
Mm.
so that you can see it continuing down a bit. So I get lost in there, and I'm not sure what's going on. We might want to add just a little more light to this front leg and let that back part basically become silhouetted. And that may give us the answers, like you could just have some straps coming off the bottom of that. I can't tell.
Yeah,
But
just nitpicking.
you have that, coming down, something like that. Or you could also make it so that this torso piece could just all be leathers and rope sort of thing, so that the texture of this metal can't be confused with the metal in the background because there won't be any metal in it. And so you can change up what materials are against each other so that they couldn't be confused. Off of some. Okay. Other things that I was seeing, I would play around with some of the values. I was finding the uh, the area up here getting a little too dark in some of the sky areas, where we're getting really contrasty, where the light things are very light and the dark things are really dark, and we're losing out on a lot of midtones. And so I just circled some areas that I'd see some adjustments with. And I'd use a lighten layer and went over it and just try to separate the background so that its values were a little more muted than the foreground. And I think that just helps his overall silhouette and the lights to show up a little better because it's not fighting quite as much with everything else. And the next one is a hard light, where the light here on the underside of the character ought to be from the main light, the chain light source, not the warm light, because it's the opposite side of the light, and he's being underlit, like particularly around his eye and this area here on his face. And so I just quickly went over with a hard light in order to kind of tint that chain bluish tone. I think you need to properly paint it in and make it the right tone, but that would be a change of effect. And then on this last layer, just playing around with the lighting a little bit, where if you're not going to have this top light up here be strong enough to make the top of that horn stand out because it's lit, then we probably want to just treat it more as a silhouette. And then we can let the light from the chain underlight this area and underlight this area, and that can just be shadowed. That would be one way to treat that. And playing around that light, letting some of that bright light go up over the top. Might catch some on the inside. I'm just trying to bring a little more clarification and form to some of this stuff that didn't quite have enough. Maybe some more coming along here. You could even have some maybe even coming, you know, as far as down like this way across the top of the collarbone area there. Having some light cutting across the hand so that we can develop the forms in the hand. Because otherwise, from a distant read, you can't make out the fingers. I mean, you can tell it's a hand, but you lose any sense of the real fingers in there. But if we had the light cutting down through here, we could get some more definition from those guys. Adding a little more light in the background so the shapes aren't just so flat. You've developed that a little bit here on this one. I would push it further, develop some more of them, and put, to put some light on them. I did it really, really rough. You'd want to develop it. So they're minor changes, but if I flip them all on and off, I think you can kind of tell the direction. It just simplifies it a little bit. I think it gets it to read a little better on a card printing. And I would also wonder about doing a little more detail work on the foreground chains. In the same way some of the other guys have gone in here and, you know, they let the edges of the chains actually be a little brighter. And then the inside is more see-through, it's more spectral. And that sort of approach could work really well just on these foreground, like the foreground fifth of the chains. Right there. And then you don't need to do it on the rest of them, but it would give a certain amount of visual detail and clarity and interest to this. Really, it's a major part of the image. And I do kind of like the textury stuff. Like this is almost a little chaotic magic, and it's got, you know, little sparky stuff all over it. But still, I think there's some detail that you could get out of it, and showing it having a form, because I feel right now that they're just flat shapes. They're interacting well, but I don't feel like they have any kind of volume. And if we can establish that with just some of the foreground ones, it would work quite well. Something else I did with the lighten layer is you've got this sort of reverse haloing going on around some of the chains where the glow around them is actually making it darker so that it's like the background gets darker around the chains for them to show up, and that just wouldn't be the case. So you can get that background color, get a lighten layer. So we would come in here with that lighten layer and say anything lighter than that, anything darker than that, we're going to lighten it. That way you can paint right up to the chains using whatever that background is, because light isn't going to darken things. Only going to lighten things up. And so we need to go around some of these edges and make sure that we're not allowing whatever mode your blending mode is to actually darken things with the light from the chain. And you can tint it it can shift it, cooler like you're kind of seeing here, but it shouldn't actually darken it. So it's kind of a small change, but you should go around and make sure that. Okay. Any more thoughts?
Hmm. For this one, not really. It's just the nitpicking. I wouldn't be able to. I mean, it's already so close to being a finished image
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, I don't have anything. It might be my skill level that is just capped there.
No, no. Well, it's kudos to him then, and because the
Yeah.
scene is working really well. I think it's got a great read. A little cleanup here and there. I think it's totally printable. I think it's totally usable by a client. So hopefully you can get that couple of little polishes here and there, and toss it in your gallery.
Yeah.
Hopefully you found it helpful. And brainstorm about the next challenge. All right. Well, it's been a long stream, 3 hour stream today, but I think we went over some really good stuff and
Yeah.
some good questions.
I was gonna say, especially that whole productivity part in the toner section, I think you
Hmm.
could even make a whole video out of it. Um,
Yeah, I could just clip
fun.
that section out and make it a standalone. Hmm.
I think that would be fun to reference for just everybody on here.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're gonna end it there on this stream. Of course, members, join me tomorrow. Oh yeah, and I will be putting very soon. I will be giving you the link to upload your image. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Tomorrow, is it right?
Yeah, tomorrow, Wednesday, for the
Double
members
stream.
paint over. And then this Friday, we will have the finals for Group 2 of this same challenge. So
Whoa.
set aside a little money. We should kick off Saturday with a new challenge. And so if you want to get in on that, then, that's going to be 25 to jump into the challenge. And throughout the week, if you want some more feedback, lots of people out on the Discord group. You can find the link in the video description below. So I will see you guys out there.
Yes.
And until next time, keep drawing.